The woman they called the statue stole her husband's most prized possession, and then she proved she could drive it better than he ever could. Lucian DeLuca ruled Chicago's underworld with an iron fist, but he never suspected that his silent, obedient wife harbored a secret identity that could shatter everything he thought he knew. When Valeria vanished into the night behind the wheel of his vintage Mustang, she didn't just steal a car, she reclaimed the life he'd buried beneath 6 months of suffocating expectations. Follow this story to the end, hit that like button, and comment your city below so I can see how far this tale of speed, secrets, and salvation travels. The Sinclair Hotel ballroom glittered like a jewel box designed to showcase Chicago's most dangerous predators. Crystal chandeliers cast fractured light across marble floors, illuminating men in tailored suits who controlled territories instead of corporations, and women draped in silk who understood that survival required more than beauty. It demanded strategic invisibility. Valeria DeLuca stood 3 steps behind her husband, her posture perfect, her champagne untouched, her expression carefully blank. The emerald gown that clung to her frame had cost more than most people earned in a year, selected by Lucian's stylist to complement his charcoal suit without outshining it. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant chignon, her makeup flawless, her jewelry precisely chosen to signal wealth without vulgarity. She was, by every measure, exactly what Lucian DeLuca's wife should be. A trophy. An ornament. A beautiful silent thing. "Your wife is exquisite," Marco Bellini said, his gaze sliding over Valeria with the clinical assessment of a man appraising livestock. "So refined. So quiet." Lucian's hand settled possessively on the small of Valeria's back, warm through the silk. "She understands her role." Valeria's smile never wavered. 6 months of practice had perfected the art of standing beside her husband while disappearing entirely, of being present without being noticed, of existing as an extension of his power rather than a person in her own right. The Underworld Gala was an annual tradition, a gathering where territories were negotiated over aged whiskey, alliances were forged between courses of a 7-course meal, and violence simmered beneath every polite exchange. Valeria had learned to read the room's shifting dynamics, to identify which men held real power and which merely pretended to recognize the moment when conversation became threat. But nobody here knew what she could read in the subtle shift of weight, the microscopic adjustment of grip, the telltale tension that preceded action. Nobody here suspected that the woman they dismissed as decorative could calculate trajectory, velocity, and outcome faster than most men could draw their weapons. "Excuse me," Lucian said, his tone polite but absolute. "Gentlemen, I need a moment." He guided Valeria toward a quieter corner of the ballroom, his hand still warm against her spine. To any observer, they looked like a devoted couple seeking a moment of privacy. Valeria knew better. 6 months had taught her to distinguish between Lucian's public performances and his private disappointments. "You're doing well tonight," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "Very well. Thank you." Valeria's response was soft, perfectly modulated, utterly empty. Lucian's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Relax, Valeria. You don't need to be so stiff." But relaxation was a luxury she couldn't afford. The moment she dropped her guard, the moment she let herself be anything other than what he expected, she risked everything. So she maintained her careful composure, her strategic silence, her deliberate invisibility. "I should return to the guests," Lucian said after a moment. "Stay close." Valeria nodded, falling back into position 3 steps behind him as they rejoined the crowd. She watched him navigate conversations with the ease of a man born to power, his charisma deployed like a weapon, his threats wrapped in charm. He was magnificent in his element, ruthless and brilliant, commanding and controlled, and utterly, devastatingly bored with her. She'd known it for weeks now, had felt it in the way his gaze slid past her at breakfast, in the decreasing frequency of his attempts at conversation, in the mechanical precision of their increasingly rare physical encounters. Lucian DeLuca had married her for reasons that had nothing to do with love and everything to do with appearance, and now that the novelty had faded, he was discovering that a beautiful statue offered little in the way of companionship. The realization should have hurt. Instead, it sparked something darker, a cold fury that burned beneath her carefully maintained facade. "Lucian!" Vincent Corso approached with the confidence of a man who controlled half of the city's shipping routes. I heard you acquired the '69 Mustang. The Boss 429? Lucian's expression transformed, genuine pleasure breaking through his calculated charm. You heard correctly. Candy apple red, original engine, less than 40,000 miles. She's a masterpiece. I'd kill to see her. Come by the estate next week. I'll take you for a drive. Lucian's pride was palpable. The Mustang was his prized possession, acquired through months of negotiation and a sum that would have funded a small army. He spoke about the car with more passion than he'd ever directed toward his wife. Valeria listened to them discuss horsepower and torque, restoration and authenticity, their enthusiasm sharp against her numbness. She understood cars better than either of them realized, understood them in ways that had nothing to do with collector's value and everything to do with what they could do when pushed to their limits. But that knowledge belonged to a different life, a life she'd buried 6 months ago when she'd walked down the aisle toward a man who needed a wife that looked good on his arm and knew when to stay silent. The evening crawled forward with excruciating slowness. Valeria smiled when appropriate, nodded when expected, and maintained her position in Lucian's shadow. She was good at this role now, had perfected the art of strategic invisibility. It was close to midnight when she excused herself to the powder room, needing a moment away from the performance. The bathroom was a sanctuary of marble and gold fixtures, blessedly empty. Valeria stood before the mirror, studying the woman who looked back at her. She barely recognized herself. The sound of male voices filtered through the bathroom's outer door, a conversation happening in the adjacent hallway, close enough that words carried clearly through the expensive architecture. Quite the acquisition, someone was saying, both the car and the wife. Valeria froze, her hand halfway to her lipstick. The Mustang was worth every penny. Lucian's voice, unmistakable in its smooth confidence. The wife, a pause, heavy with implications. Well, she serves her purpose. She's stunning, I'll give you that. But is she always so lifeless? A low laugh, Lucian's laugh. That's precisely the problem, isn't it? I thought I wanted someone refined, someone who wouldn't challenge me or complicate things. Turns out, I married a statue, beautiful to look at, utterly hollow inside. The words landed like physical blows, each one precise and devastating. Any regrets? The other man asked. Regrets? No. Boredom? Absolutely. Lucian's voice carried the casual dismissiveness of a man discussing disappointing weather. She's exactly what I thought I wanted. Quiet, obedient, decorative. But Christ, Vincent, it's like living with a ghost. She has no fire, no passion, no substance. Sometimes I wonder if there's anything real beneath all that careful composure. Valeria's reflection stared back at her, emerald silk and perfect makeup and strategic invisibility. Her hand trembled just slightly before she forced it steady. 6 months of suffocating her true self, of playing the role he'd required, of becoming exactly what he'd claimed to want. And he was bored. The fury that had been simmering beneath her careful facade ignited, cold and absolute. She'd sacrificed everything, her identity, her passion, her very self, to become what Lucian DeLuca needed. She'd buried Nick so deep that sometimes she forgot the woman she'd been, the life she'd lived, the fire that had once defined her. For this, for a man who found her hollow. Valeria's fingers found her phone, pulling up the security app that controlled their estate's systems. Lucian had given her access months ago, never imagining she'd use it for anything beyond adjusting the thermostat or checking when he'd arrive home. The garage security showed 4 vehicles: Lucian's armored SUV, her own tasteful sedan, a backup car for the household staff, and the Mustang. The beautiful, pristine, utterly precious 1969 Mustang that Lucian loved more than he'd ever loved his wife. The camera feeds showed the estate's security detail following predictable patterns, guards at the main gate, perimeter checks every 20 minutes. Interior surveillance focused on entry points rather than the garage itself. She'd watched these patterns for 6 months without realizing she'd been studying them, cataloging weak points and timing windows with the instincts of someone who'd spent years evading pursuit. Nix's instincts. Still there, buried, but not dead. Valeria made her decision in the space between heartbeats. She touched up her lipstick, straightened her already perfect posture, and walked back into the ballroom with the same careful composure she'd maintained all evening. Lucian was still deep in conversation with Vincent and two other men, discussing something about shipping routes and territorial adjustments. He didn't notice when she approached, didn't register her presence until she touched his arm with exactly the right amount of deference. "I have a headache," she said softly, her voice carrying just the right note of apologetic fragility. "Would you mind if I took the car home early?" Lucian barely glanced at her. "Take the sedan. I'll need the SUV later." "Of course." Valeria smiled, the expression practiced and empty. "I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening." She collected her clutch and wrap, offered polite goodbyes to the appropriate people, and walked out of the Sinclair Hotel with the same elegant composure she'd maintained all night. The valet brought her sedan around, and she tipped him with practiced generosity. Then she drove home, parked the sedan in its designated spot, and walked into the estate she'd called home for 6 months. The silence of the massive house pressed against her, familiar and suffocating. Valeria climbed the stairs to the master bedroom, kicked off her heels, and stripped out of the emerald gown with methodical precision. She hung it carefully in the closet. Lucian's stylist would expect it to be properly maintained, and pulled on clothes she'd hidden in the back. Dark jeans, a black-fitted jacket, boots designed for grip rather than elegance. Her hair came down, the careful chignon dissolving into loose waves. She scrubbed off the carefully applied makeup, watching her reflection transform from Lucian's perfect wife into something rawer, more real, more like Nick's. The keypad for the garage security was in the kitchen. Valeria disabled the motion sensors and camera feeds with the access Lucian had given her, creating a 30-minute window of electronic blindness. The guards outside wouldn't notice. Their attention was focused outward, watching for threats approaching the estate, not treasures leaving it. The garage smelled like expensive machinery and premium fuel. 4 vehicles waited in climate-controlled perfection, but Valeria's attention fixed on only one. The 1969 Mustang Boss 429 sat beneath soft lighting like a sculpture in a museum, every curve and angle designed for a single purpose: speed. Candy apple red paint gleamed under the lights. Chrome accents caught and reflected her movement, and the original 429 cubic inch V8 engine waited with coiled potential. Lucian's most prized possession, the thing he loved with genuine passion. Valeria ran her hand along the car's flank, feeling the perfect smoothness of the restoration. She'd watched him obsess over this vehicle for weeks before it arrived, had listened to him describe every specification with more enthusiasm than he'd ever shown discussing their marriage. The key fob was in the secure drawer where Lucian kept his most valuable items: watches, cufflinks, and the Mustang's keys. Valeria knew the combination. She knew everything about this house, had spent 6 months learning its secrets while pretending to be too vapid to notice them. The engine roared to life with a sound like controlled thunder, 8 cylinders awakening with predatory hunger. The vibration traveled through the steering wheel, through the seat, through Valeria's entire body. It was a sensation she hadn't felt in 6 months, and it hit her like electricity, pure, undiluted, absolutely intoxicating. She'd forgotten what it felt like to hold this much power in her hands. The garage door opened smoothly, revealing the curved driveway and the estate's front gate beyond. The guards at the gate would recognize the Mustang, would assume Lucian was behind the wheel. By the time they realized their mistake, she'd be gone. Valeria guided the Mustang down the driveway with careful precision, keeping her speed moderate, her movements unremarkable. The guards waved her through without question, their attention already shifting back to their surveillance of the perimeter. And then she was through the gate, onto the private road that connected the estate to the city beyond. Valeria's foot pressed down on the accelerator, feeling the Mustang respond with eager violence. The engine's growl deepened, became a roar, and suddenly she was moving, really moving, for the first time in half a year. The city opened before her, Chicago's nighttime streets spreading in familiar patterns. She knew these roads, had raced them in another life when she'd been someone else entirely. The muscle memory was still there, buried beneath 6 months of strategic forgetting, waiting to resurface. She took the turns faster than was strictly legal, testing the Mustang's handling, relearning the dance between driver and machine. The car was magnificent, responsive, powerful, precise. Lucian had chosen well, even if he'd never pushed the vehicle beyond cautious weekend drives designed to show off its beauty rather than explore its capability. Valeria's phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it. Then it buzzed again, insistent, demanding. Let him wonder. Let him panic. Let him realize that his beautiful statue had walked away. The dockside district appeared in her windshield, industrial buildings giving way to warehouses and shipping containers. This was the part of Chicago that most of Lucian's wealthy associates never saw. The working guts of the city where cargo moved and money changed hands, and people who lived outside the law gathered to test themselves against physics and each other. She knew where she was going before she consciously made the decision. The old textile warehouse at the edge of the shipping district, abandoned for a decade, repurposed by people who needed a place to race without interference. The same warehouse where Nix had built her legend. Valeria parked the Mustang 2 blocks away, on a side street dark enough to provide cover. She sat for a moment in the driver's seat, engine idling, feeling the steady thrum of power beneath the hood. She could still turn back, could return the car to the garage, restore the security systems, slip back into the emerald gown and pretend this moment of rebellion had never happened. Could continue being the perfect, hollow wife that Lucian had married. Instead, she killed the engine and stepped out into the Chicago night. The walk to the warehouse took 3 minutes. Valeria moved through shadows with practiced ease, her body remembering skills she thought she'd forgotten. The sound of engines and shouting grew louder as she approached, the distinctive roar of high-performance vehicles pushed to their limits. The warehouse's loading bay stood open, spilling light and noise into the darkness. Inside, a crowd had gathered around a makeshift track, shipping containers arranged to create tight corners and dangerous straightaways, floodlights mounted to illuminate the circuit, and at least 50 people who'd come to watch speed transformed into art. Or violence. Sometimes it was hard to tell the difference. Valeria stood in the shadows at the bay's edge, watching the current race unfold. A Nissan GTR and a modified BMW M3 screamed through the circuit, their drivers pushing limits, testing margins. The crowd roared with each near collision, each perfect drift, each moment where skill barely triumphed over physics. She'd forgotten how alive it felt, how real. Can't afford the entry fee? The voice came from her left. A man in his 30s with grease-stained hands and sharp eyes. One of the organizers, she guessed, someone who controlled access to the circuit. Valeria turned to face him, and something in her expression made him step back slightly. I can afford it, she said quietly. Then, you're in the wrong spot. Drivers are on the other side. He gestured toward a cluster of cars and their owners, gathered near the starting line. I need to get my car. Where is it? 2 blocks south, Candy Apple Red 69 Mustang Boss 429. The organizer's eyebrows climbed. That's a collector's piece. You don't race a car like that. I do. Valeria pulled out the key fob, let him see the Mustang's distinctive emblem. Unless you're too scared to let me on the track. His laugh was sharp and surprised. Scared? Lady, I don't give a damn what you destroy. Entry fee is $2,000. You crash, you clean up your own mess. You damage the course. You pay for repairs. You got a problem with any of that? No problem. What's your name? Valeria hesitated for just a moment, feeling the weight of a decision that couldn't be unmade. Then she smiled, and it was nothing like the careful, empty expressions she'd perfected as Lucian's wife. Nix. The organizer's expression shifted, surprise bleeding into speculation. Nix? The Nix? Does it matter? It matters if you're the driver who disappeared 18 months ago after beating everyone stupid enough to challenge her. It matters if you're the ghost who could make a car do things that shouldn't be physically possible. He studied her more carefully now, seeing past the expensive clothes to something harder underneath. There's a bounty, you know. 3 different crews want to race the person who used to own that name. Then they can line up. You're serious? Do I look like I'm joking? The organizer's grin was pure appreciation. Bring your car. Let's see if you're as good as the legends say. Valeria walked back to the Mustang with her heart hammering in her chest, adrenaline singing through her veins. She'd forgotten this feeling, the electric anticipation before a race, the knowledge that she was about to push herself and her vehicle to the absolute edge of capability. She'd forgotten what it felt like to be Nix. The Mustang roared to life under her hands, responding like it had been waiting for someone who understood what it could do. Valeria guided it through the dark streets toward the warehouse, feeling the car's weight and power, calibrating her instincts to this specific machine's characteristics. When she pulled into the warehouse loading bay, conversation died. Heads turned, voices hushed. People stared at the candy apple red masterpiece with appreciation that bordered on religious awe, then shifted their attention to the driver stepping out of the vehicle. Valeria met their gazes with steady confidence, no trace of the careful deference she showed at Lucian's galas. This was her territory, had been her world before she'd traded it for emerald gowns and strategic invisibility. "No fucking way," someone breathed. The crowd parted as she walked toward the starting line, conversations erupting in her wake. She caught fragments. "That's Nix. I thought she was dead. Look at that car." But she kept moving, kept her focus on the circuit ahead. A Ferrari. 488 waited at the starting line, its driver leaning against the door with casual arrogance. He was young, maybe 25, with the kind of confidence that came from winning too often against insufficient competition. "You're the mystery challenger?" He looked her up and down, clearly unimpressed. "What's your name, sweetheart?" "Nix." His expression flickered. Recognition, doubt, then dismissal. "Nix is a myth. Some ghost story people tell to make underground racing sound more interesting." "Then you've got nothing to worry about." Valeria gestured toward the circuit. "Unless you're scared to race a ghost." The crowd noise swelled, people sensing confrontation, money changing hands as bets were placed. The organizer appeared beside her, collecting entry fees, explaining rules she already knew by heart. "Standard circuit," he said. 3 laps. First across the finish line wins. You crash, you're disqualified. You damage another driver's car deliberately, you're banned for life. Any questions?" "No." Valeria slid into the Mustang's driver's seat, feeling the car settle around her like a second skin. Her hands found the wheel, her feet the pedals, her body the precise position that optimized control. She'd sat in this exact configuration 1,000 times before, in different cars, but always with the same purpose. To be faster than physics should allow. The starting lights mounted on a makeshift frame began their sequence. Red, red, red. Valeria's world narrowed to the circuit ahead, her awareness expanding to encompass every variable: tire grip, weight distribution, the Mustang's power curve, the Ferrari's likely strategy. Green. She launched with practiced precision, the Mustang's engine screaming as she balanced acceleration against traction. The Ferrari jumped ahead initially, its modern engineering giving it an advantage off the line, but Valeria didn't panic. This wasn't about the first corner. This was about the long game. The circuit's first turn approached fast, a tight right-hander between shipping containers. The Ferrari's driver braked hard, too hard, sacrificing speed for safety. Valeria carried her momentum deeper into the turn, feeling the Mustang's rear end start to slide, using the drift to pivot the car through the apex with minimal scrubbing. She exited the corner level with the Ferrari, engine roaring, adrenaline singing. The second turn was a left-hand sweeper that required commitment, faith that the tires would hold, trust in physics and skill. Valeria accelerated through it while the Ferrari's driver lifted, his caution costing him precious tenths of a second. And she was ahead. The crowd's roar penetrated her focus, a distant thunder that validated what she already knew. She was faster. The Mustang was a revelation under her hands, raw power matched with surprising agility. The classic muscle car responding to her inputs with the precision of something built for exactly this purpose. Lap 2. The Ferrari's driver was pushing now, trying to close the gap, taking risks his skill level couldn't support. Valeria watched him in her mirrors, reading his desperation in the way his car twitched through corners, the way he braked too late and accelerated too early. He was fast, but he wasn't Nix. The third lap was a victory parade disguised as a race. Valeria extended her lead with surgical precision, each corner a demonstration of what happened when skill met preparation, met absolute commitment. The Mustang danced through the circuit like it had been designed for this exact track, and maybe in some way it had been, built by people who understood that power meant nothing without control. She crossed the finish line 3 car lengths ahead of the Ferrari, the Mustang's engine still screaming its triumphant song. The crowd erupted. Valeria brought the car to a controlled stop and stepped out into chaos. People were shouting, laughing, pressing forward to see the car and the driver who just made the impossible look routine. Money changed hands as bets were settled. Someone was already setting up the next race, other drivers lining up to challenge the ghost who'd just proven she was real. "Holy shit," the organizer said, appearing beside her with undisguised admiration. "That was... holy shit. I need another race." "You need about 5 more races? Every driver here wants a shot at you now." He grinned. "Welcome back, Nix." Valeria looked at the crowd, at the cars waiting their turn, at the circuit that had been her proving ground in another life. The adrenaline was still singing through her veins, pure and clean and absolutely addictive. She'd forgotten what it felt like to be alive. Her phone buzzed insistently in her pocket. She pulled it out, saw 17 missed calls from Lucian, each one marked urgent. Let him wait. Let him wonder where his hollow statue had gone. "Line them up," Valeria said to the organizer. "I'm not done yet." She raced 4 more times that night, beating a Porsche 911 Turbo, a modified Supra, a Corvette Z06, and finally a Lamborghini Huracan whose driver refused to believe that a classic Mustang could possibly be faster than his Italian masterpiece. She proved him wrong. By the time she finished, it was past 3 in the morning. The crowd had swelled to over 100 people, word spreading through Chicago's underground that Nix had returned, that the ghost was real and she was driving a candy apple red Mustang that shouldn't be able to do the things it was doing. Valeria sat in the driver's seat between races, feeling the engine's heat through the floorboards, feeling more herself than she had in 6 months. This was who she was, not Lucian's decorative wife, not the hollow statue he'd grown bored with, but someone who could take a machine to its absolute limits and make it sing. Her phone had stopped buzzing around midnight. Now, at 3:47 a.m., it lit up with a new message. "Lucian, where are you?" Simple, direct, controlled fury barely contained by 4 words. Valeria smiled and didn't answer. She drove the Mustang out of the warehouse as dawn began to paint the eastern sky. The crowd parting to let her through. Their respect and admiration a validation she'd needed without realizing it. The car's engine had settled into a satisfied purr, well used but not abused, pushed hard but never beyond its limits. She didn't go home. Instead, she drove through Chicago's waking streets, watching the city transform from night to day, feeling the Mustang's steering wheel under her hands, and knowing that she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She'd stopped being the hollow statue, and she had absolutely no intention of going back. The sun was fully risen by the time Valeria pulled the Mustang into a 24-hour diner on the outskirts of the city, her body buzzing with adrenaline and exhaustion in equal measure. She'd been driving for hours, racing for most of them, and now the crash was beginning to set in, the inevitable come-down after pushing herself to the edge. She ordered coffee and toast she didn't eat, sitting in a corner booth where she could watch the parking lot and the candy apple red Mustang gleaming in the early morning light. Her phone sat on the table beside her plate, silent now, but she knew that silence wouldn't last. Lucian would be looking for her, looking for his car, and when he found either, there would be consequences. The thought should have terrified her. Instead, it sparked something that felt dangerously close to satisfaction. Her coffee was half finished when the diner's door opened and 3 men walked in, their body language immediately setting off alarms in Valeria's mind. They moved like predators, scanning the space with practiced efficiency, their attention fixing on her within seconds. Not Lucian's men. She would have recognized his security detail. These were someone else's. The leader approached her booth with calculated confidence, his expensive suit at odds with the diner's worn vinyl and chipped formica. He was older than his companions, maybe 45, with the kind of controlled physicality that suggested military training repurposed for less legal enterprises. "Nix," he said, sliding into the seat across from her without invitation. "Quite the performance last night." Valeria's hand moved subtly toward her jacket pocket, where she kept the small blade she'd carried since her racing days. "Do I know you?" "Marcus Chen. I run the East Side Circuit." His smile was sharp and knowing. "You destroyed some of my best drivers last night. Cost me about 30,000 in lost bets." "Then you bet wrong." "No, I bet exactly right. On you, every time." Marcus gestured toward the Mustang visible through the window. "That's Lucian DeLuca's car. Everyone in the underground knows about his precious vintage restoration, which means either you stole it or you're connected to him in ways that make this situation very interesting. Valeria said nothing, her expression carefully neutral. I'm guessing you're connected, Marcus continued, because someone who steals a car that recognizable isn't stupid enough to race it in public unless they're making a point. So the question is, what point are you making, and how much trouble is Lucian DeLuca going to cause when he figures out his wife is Nyx? The revelation hung in the air between them, heavy with implications. Valeria's pulse kicked up, but she maintained her composure, years of practice allowing her to hide the spike of anxiety. How long have you known? Since about 2 hours ago, when one of my people pulled property records and society page photographs. Marcus leaned back, studying her with open curiosity. Valeria DeLuca, née Rossi, married 6 months ago in a ceremony that was supposed to unite two powerful families. The bride was described as refined, elegant, and notably private. No one mentioned she used to be the most dangerous driver in Chicago. Used to be? Last night suggested you haven't lost your edge. He paused, letting the weight of his knowledge settle. The question is what you're planning to do now that you've announced your return. Because walking away from Lucian DeLuca isn't something people generally survive. Valeria's fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup, buying time to think. Marcus Chen represented opportunity and danger in equal measure. The East Side Circuit was neutral territory, controlled by interests that operated independently of the major crime families. If she needed allies outside of Lucian's world, this was where she'd find them. I'm not walking away from anything, she said carefully. I'm reclaiming what I gave up. By stealing his car and destroying his credibility? By reminding him that I'm not a statue he can admire and ignore. Marcus's laugh was genuinely appreciative. You've got bigger problems than a bored husband, Nyx. Word is already spreading about last night. By noon, everyone in Chicago's underground will know that Lucian DeLuca's perfect wife is the legendary street racer who disappeared 18 months ago. His enemies are going to see that as weakness. His allies are going to question his judgment. And Lucian himself is going to have to decide whether you're an asset worth protecting or a liability that needs to be eliminated. The brutal assessment landed with the force of truth. Valeria had been so focused on her own fury, her own need to reclaim her identity, that she hadn't fully calculated the broader implications. In Lucian's world, image was everything. Control was everything, and she'd just demonstrated that he controlled neither his wife nor his possessions. What would you do? She asked. Me? I'd leverage the hell out of it. Marcus gestured toward the Mustang. You've got skills that are worth serious money. You've got access to Lucian's world that most people would kill for. And you've clearly got the spine to stand up to one of Chicago's most dangerous men. Those are assets if you're smart enough to use them. I'm not interested in betraying my husband. I'm not asking you to. I'm suggesting you negotiate from a position of strength instead of waiting for him to decide your fate. Marcus pulled a business card from his pocket, sliding it across the table. When Lucian comes looking for you, and he will, make sure you've got options. My circuit is neutral territory. You need a place to race, a place to think, a place where DeLuca family politics don't apply. You know where to find me. He stood, his companions moving to flank him with practiced precision. For what it's worth, I hope you survive this. The underground racing scene has been boring as hell since you disappeared. It'd be nice to have the competition again. They left as efficiently as they'd arrived, the diner's door closing behind them with a soft chime. Valeria sat alone with her cold coffee and racing thoughts, Marcus Chen's business card a small rectangle of potential on the table. Her phone buzzed. Finally, a new message from Lucian. Come home, now. We need to talk. No threats, no rage, just controlled expectation that she would obey. Valeria stared at the message for a long moment, feeling the weight of decision pressing down on her. She could go home, return the Mustang, apologize for the disruption, and hope that Lucian's pride would allow him to forgive the humiliation. She could slip back into the role of perfect wife, bury Nyx again, pretend that last night had been an aberration rather than an awakening. Or she could drive the Mustang straight to the estate, park it exactly where she'd found it, and make Lucian face the woman he'd married instead of the statue he'd created. She chose the latter. The drive back to the DeLuca estate took 30 minutes through Chicago's mid-morning traffic. Valeria used the time to steady herself, to prepare for the confrontation she knew was coming. She'd challenged Lucian's authority, damaged his reputation, and demonstrated a level of independence that undermined everything their marriage was supposed to represent. He would be furious. The question was whether that fury would manifest as violence or something more calculated. The estate's gate stood open when she arrived, unusual for mid-morning when security protocols typically kept them closed except for scheduled arrivals. She drove through slowly, the Mustang's engine purring with satisfied exhaustion, and found the circular driveway occupied by 3 additional vehicles she didn't recognize. Lucian had company. That complicated things. Valeria parked the Mustang in its designated spot in the garage, taking a moment to appreciate the vehicle's flawless exterior despite hours of hard driving. She'd pushed it to its limits without exceeding them, had tested its capabilities without damaging its precision. Lucian might be angry about the unauthorized use, but he couldn't claim she'd harmed his precious possession. The house was unnaturally quiet when she entered through the garage's interior door, the usual sounds of household staff conspicuously absent. Someone had cleared the building, which meant Lucian wanted privacy for whatever was about to happen. She found him in his office, standing behind his desk with his back to the door, looking out over the estate's manicured grounds. He was still wearing last night's suit, the jacket discarded, his shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows. The posture suggested he'd been awake all night, waiting. 3 other men occupied the office's leather chairs. Vincent Corso from last night's gala, Marcus Bellini, who controlled the city's southern territories, and a younger man Valeria didn't recognize but whose resemblance to Bellini suggested family connection. All 4 turned when she entered, their attention fixing on her with varying degrees of curiosity and calculation. "Gentlemen," Lucian said without preamble, "allow me to properly introduce my wife, Valeria De Luca, also known, apparently, as Nyx." The younger Bellini's eyes widened slightly. Vincent Corso's expression remained carefully neutral. Marcus Bellini laughed, a sharp bark of surprise. "The street racer?" Bellini said. "The ghost who disappeared?" "The very same." Lucian's voice was controlled, almost conversational, which made it more dangerous than rage would have been. "I learned this interesting fact around 2 this morning when my head of security informed me that my vintage Mustang had been stolen by someone who knew how to disable the estate's systems without triggering any alarms." "That must have been quite the shock," Vincent said carefully. "Shock is an inadequate word. Imagine my surprise when I tracked the car to an illegal racing circuit in the Dockside district and watched security footage of my wife, my quiet, refined, perfectly obedient wife, absolutely destroying some of the city's best drivers." Valeria held his gaze steadily, refusing to show the anxiety churning in her gut. This was the moment that would define everything that came next. Backing down now would confirm his assessment of her as hollow. Standing firm might cost her everything. "You called me a statue," she said quietly. "Hollow and boring. I thought I'd remind you that I'm not." The office went absolutely silent. Vincent Corso's eyebrows climbed. The younger Bellini looked like he wanted to flee. Marcus Bellini's grin widened appreciatively. Lucian turned to face her fully, and the expression on his face was complex. Fury, yes, but also something that might have been respect fighting with injured pride. "You overheard my conversation with Vincent." "I did. And your response was to steal my most valuable possession and publicly humiliate me by demonstrating skills you've been hiding for 6 months?" "My response was to stop pretending to be someone I'm not." Valeria took 3 steps into the office, her posture straight, her voice steady. "You wanted a decorative wife who wouldn't challenge you or complicate your life. I tried to give you that, but you can't marry someone and then complain when they become exactly what you demanded." "I didn't demand you lie about who you are. You demanded I be quiet, refined, and invisible. That's exactly what lying about who I am looks like." Vincent Corso coughed quietly, clearly uncomfortable with witnessing a marital confrontation that carried implications far beyond personal discord. "Perhaps we should give you 2 privacy." "No." Lucian's voice cracked like a whip. "Stay. All of you." He gestured toward Valeria. "My wife has apparently decided that our private business should be conducted in the public arena. Let's see how she handles the consequences." Valeria's pulse hammered, but she maintained her composure. This was a test. Lucian was establishing dominance by refusing her the dignity of a private confrontation, by forcing her to defend herself in front of men who would judge her, assess her, and report their observations throughout Chicago's underworld. The consequences of what? She asked. Being honest about my capabilities? Reminding you that I have value beyond my appearance? The consequences of theft, property damage, and making me look weak. I didn't damage your car. I drove it exactly as it was meant to be driven, and I returned it in perfect condition. As for making you look weak, Valeria paused, choosing her words with surgical precision. I made you look like a man who didn't know what he had. That's not weakness. That's inattention. Marcus Bellini's laugh was unrestrained now. She's got you there, Lucian. Shut up, Marcus. But there was no real heat in Lucian's rebuke. His attention remained fixed on Valeria, his brilliant tactical mind clearly processing this new dynamic, calculating angles and outcomes. You think this is about the car? I think this is about control, Valeria said. You controlled who I was, what I showed the world, how I presented myself in your spaces. Last night, I took that control back. And yes, I did it publicly because private rebellion doesn't change anything. It just gets buried and ignored. So this was a message. This was me refusing to be a statue. The younger Bellini was watching this exchange with open fascination, clearly not accustomed to seeing anyone challenge Lucian DeLuca so directly. Vincent Corso's expression had shifted from discomfort to something like careful interest. Lucian walked around his desk with deliberate slowness, each step measured, his body language predatory. He stopped 3 feet from Valeria, close enough that she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his jaw, the complex calculation happening behind his controlled exterior. You could have told me, he said, his voice lower now, meant for her despite their audience. About your racing, about Nick's, about any of it. Would you have believed me? Or would you have thought I was trying to make myself interesting, trying to be something I wasn't? Valeria held his gaze. You married me because I was quiet and refined. You didn't want complications. You didn't want a partner who would challenge you or demand your attention. You wanted exactly what you said I was, something beautiful to look at that wouldn't disrupt your life. That's not... Lucian stopped, his jaw tightening. That's not entirely fair. Then tell me what was unfair about it. The confrontation hung between them, raw and unresolved. Valeria could see Lucian processing, could almost watch his tactical mind working through implications and calculations. He'd been caught off guard, his assumptions shattered, his carefully constructed marriage revealed as a house built on incomplete information. The racing, he said finally. How good are you, actually? I'm the best driver in Chicago. I was before we married, and based on last night's performance, I still am. Show me. The demand caught her off guard. What? Show me. Lucian's expression shifted, fury giving way to something more complex, curiosity mixed with challenge. You destroyed my credibility last night. Every person in the underground now knows that my wife is Nick's, that I didn't know who I married, that I called you hollow while you were secretly legendary. The only way to salvage this is to demonstrate that you're an asset, not a liability. How? Lucian turned to address his guests. Gentlemen, it appears my morning schedule has changed. Marcus, you've been bragging about your nephew's driving for months. Vincent, your son just bought that ridiculous German import. I propose a race, my wife against your best drivers. If she wins, we end this conversation about weakness and damaged credibility. If she loses, he paused, looking back at Valeria. If she loses, we discuss consequences. Marcus Bellini's grin was pure satisfaction. You want to race your wife against our people? In front of witnesses? I want to prove that what she did last night wasn't a fluke or a lucky night. I want to demonstrate that Valeria DeLuca is exactly what she claims to be. Lucian's eyes held Valeria's, and she could see the calculation there, the ruthless pragmatism that had built his empire. And if she's going to blow up my carefully constructed image of our marriage, the least she can do is make the chaos useful. Valeria's mind raced. This was opportunity and trap simultaneously. Winning would validate her skills, would force Lucian and his allies to see her as more than decorative. But losing would confirm his assessment of her as someone who'd gotten lucky, someone whose rebellion amounted to nothing meaningful. Where? She asked. The old airfield on the north side. Neutral territory. Enough space for a proper circuit. Private enough that we won't attract unwanted attention. Lucian was already moving, his energy shifting from confrontational to focused. We'll set it up for this afternoon. 3 races. You against Marcus's nephew, against Vincent's son, and against whoever else wants to challenge the legendary Nyx. And if I refuse? Then you confirm that last night was a performance rather than reality. Your choice. Vincent Corso shifted uncomfortably. Lucian, is this really necessary? You could simply, what? Discipline my wife for embarrassing me? Beat her into submission? Lock her in the house and pretend last night never happened? Lucian's laugh was sharp. Vincent, you know me better than that. I don't waste resources, and I don't ignore potential advantages. If Valeria is truly Nyx, then she's worth far more as an ally than an enemy. And if she's lying, the younger Bellini asked, then we'll all learn a valuable lesson about the dangers of overconfidence. Lucian gestured toward the door. Gentlemen, you have 4 hours to gather your drivers and whatever you're willing to wager. I'll handle the logistics. The men filed out, Marcus Bellini still grinning, Vincent Corso looking concerned, the younger Bellini appearing stunned by the morning's revelations. When the door closed behind them, Lucian and Valeria stood alone in the office, the weight of 6 months of carefully maintained pretense finally stripped away. You're angry, Valeria said. I'm furious. Lucian's control cracked slightly, real emotion bleeding through. You lied to me for 6 months. You let me believe you were someone you're not. You made me look like a fool who doesn't know his own wife. You made assumptions about who I should be and never asked if they were accurate. Because you confirmed every assumption. You were quiet, refined, perfect. You never challenged me, never questioned anything, never gave me any reason to look deeper. Because that's what you wanted. Valeria's own anger was rising now, 6 months of suppression finally breaking free. You wanted a wife who wouldn't complicate your life, someone who looked good at galas and didn't demand your attention or challenge your authority. I gave you exactly that, and you got bored. So tell me, Lucian, what exactly did you want me to do differently? The question hung between them, sharp and unavoidable. Lucian ran his hand through his hair, a rare gesture of frustration that broke through his usual controlled composure. I don't know, he admitted. I thought I wanted simple, uncomplicated, someone who fit into my world without creating chaos. And instead you got me. Instead, I got someone who stole my car and destroyed the city's best drivers while I was networking at a gala. Despite himself, a smile tugged at Lucian's mouth. You know what the most infuriating part is? You're right. About all of it. I did want a statue. I did get bored when you gave me exactly what I asked for, and I absolutely made assumptions instead of asking questions. Valeria felt some of her tension ease slightly. This was the first honest conversation they'd had in months. Maybe the first truly honest conversation of their marriage. What happens now? She asked. Now you race. You prove you're as good as you claim. And then we figure out what our marriage actually is, instead of what we've been pretending it should be. Lucian crossed to his desk, pulling up information on his computer. The airfield is secured. I'll have the circuit set up within 2 hours. Who do you need there? Need? Support crew, mechanic, anyone you trust to work on the Mustang before the races. Valeria thought of the people she'd known in her Nyx days, the underground connections she'd severed when she married Lucian. Tommy Rodriguez. He ran my pit crew before I disappeared. If he's still in Chicago, he'll come. I'll find him. Lucian was already typing, his tactical mind fully engaged now. What else? The Mustang needs nothing. It's perfect as is. Confidence or truth? Both. Valeria moved closer to the desk, looking at the airfield schematics Lucian was pulling up. That car is a masterpiece. You chose well when you bought it, but it's been driven like a museum piece instead of a machine. Last night I opened it up, let it do what it was built for. It responded perfectly. Lucian studied her for a long moment, his expression complex. You really are Nyx. I tried to tell you that. You tried to hide it. Because I thought that's what you wanted. The honesty settled between them, uncomfortable but necessary. Lucian's phone buzzed with incoming messages, his network already responding to his requests, pieces moving into position for the afternoon's demonstration. 4 hours, he said. Use them however you need. Rest prepare, or run if you're smart. I'm not running. No, I'm beginning to understand that you're not. Lucian's expression softened slightly, genuine curiosity breaking through his anger. Why racing? Of all the things you could have been, all the identities you could have claimed, why choose something so dangerous? Valeria considered the question, searching for words to explain something she'd never fully articulated. Because it's the only time I feel completely real. When I'm driving at the edge of control, when everything depends on split-second decisions and absolute commitment, there's no room for pretense or performance. You're either good enough or you're not. The physics don't care about your background or your connections or what image you're trying to project. You either have the skill or you crash. And you have the skill. I have the skill. Lucian nodded slowly, processing this new information, recalibrating everything he thought he knew about the woman he'd married. Then show me. This afternoon, in front of everyone who matters, show me exactly who Valeria DeLuca really is. Valeria left the office with 4 hours to prepare for races that would define everything that came next. She found her phone had 17 new messages, most from numbers she didn't recognize, but one stood out. Tommy Rodriguez, her former pit chief, the mechanic who'd kept her cars running through dozens of underground races. Heard you were back. Heard you stole DeLuca's Mustang. Need help not getting killed this afternoon? She smiled and texted back a single word. Yes. His response came within seconds. On my way. Tommy arrived at the estate an hour later, his presence causing visible alarm among Lucian's security staff until Valeria intervened. He looked exactly as she remembered. Early 40s, grease under his fingernails, sharp eyes that could diagnose mechanical problems by sound alone. Let me see the car, he said without preamble. They walked to the garage together, and Tommy's low whistle of appreciation when he saw the Mustang made Valeria smile. He circled the vehicle slowly, his hands moving over the paint, the chrome, the perfectly restored details. This is serious machinery, he said finally. DeLuca wasn't kidding around with this restoration. Can you work with it? Can I work with it? Nix, this is a mechanic's dream. Everything is accessible, everything is logical, and the engineering is brilliant. Tommy popped the hood, studying the engine with reverent attention. You drove this last night? 5 races, won them all. How'd she handle? Like a dream. Responsive, powerful, predictable. Tommy's grin was pure satisfaction. Then we just need to make sure she stays that way. Who are you racing? Marcus Bellini's nephew, Vincent Corso's son, and whoever else shows up looking for a challenge. So basically, every hotshot driver in Chicago who thinks they're better than Nix. Basically. They spent the next 2 hours going over the Mustang with methodical precision. Tommy checked tire pressure, examined brake pads, tested suspension response, and made minute adjustments that optimized performance without changing the car's fundamental character. Valeria watched him work, feeling the familiar rhythm of pre-race preparation, the careful attention to detail that separated winners from casualties. You sure about this? Tommy asked at one point, his voice quiet. DeLuca's got a reputation. Crossing him publicly isn't something people usually survive. I'm not crossing him. I'm making him see me. By stealing his car and racing it in front of his enemies? By being honest about who I am instead of who he wanted me to be. Tommy considered this, his hands still moving over the engine. You always were stubborn. Glad to see marriage didn't change that. They finished the preparation with 40 minutes to spare. The Mustang sat ready, every system optimized, every component functioning at peak efficiency. Valeria changed into proper racing clothes. Fitted jeans, a black jacket designed for movement, boots with grip-focused soles. When Lucian's driver came to collect them, she was ready. The old airfield spread across 40 acres of cracked tarmac and abandoned buildings, remnants of a municipal airport that had closed 2 decades earlier. Someone had already set up a circuit using traffic cones and painted lines, creating a course that emphasized both speed and technical skill. At least 30 vehicles were already present, along with maybe 60 people, drivers, mechanics, observers, and various members of Chicago's underworld who'd come to watch Lucian DeLuca's wife prove or destroy her legend. Marcus Bellini approached as Valeria stepped out of the transport vehicle, his nephew trailing behind him with obvious confidence. The young man was maybe 23, fit and cocky, exactly the type who'd never lost enough to understand humility. "Nix," Marcus said with genuine warmth. "Glad you showed up. My nephew Carlo has been talking non-stop about destroying the ghost. I hope you're ready to back up last night's performance." "I'm ready." Carlo Bellini stepped forward, offering his hand with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. "I watched the footage from last night. Impressive driving, but those were street racers, not serious competition. Let's see how you handle a real circuit." Valeria shook his hand, feeling the deliberate strength he put into the grip, the subtle intimidation attempt. "What are you driving?" "Audi R8, full race spec, custom tuning, professional setup." His confidence bordered on arrogance. "You're really going to run that vintage museum piece against modern engineering?" "I am." "Your funeral." The crowd gathered as the first race was prepared, money already changing hands as bets were placed. Valeria spotted Vincent Corso's son standing beside a modified BMW M4, saw several other drivers she didn't recognize preparing vehicles that represented serious investment and skill. And there, standing slightly apart from the others with his arms crossed and his expression unreadable, stood Lucien De Luca, watching everything with the focused intensity he brought to all his strategic calculations. Tommy helped her into the Mustang, making final checks while offering quiet encouragement. "Remember your lines. Trust your instincts. Don't let him bait you into making mistakes." "I won't." The starting position placed her beside Carlo Bellini's Audi, the modern machine looking sleek and aggressive compared to the Mustang's classic brutality. Carlo revved his engine unnecessarily, the sound sharp and artificial compared to the Mustang's deep rumble. The organizer raised the starting flag, his voice cutting through the engine noise. 3 laps. First across the finish wins. Drivers ready?" Valeria's hands found their positions on the wheel, her feet the pedals, her awareness expanding to encompass the circuit, the competition, the physics that would determine the outcome. This was what she'd been born to do, the place where everything else fell away and only skill mattered. The flag dropped. Valeria launched with controlled aggression, feeling the Mustang's rear tires bite into the asphalt with perfect grip. Carlo's Audi jumped ahead initially, its modern all-wheel drive system translating power to pavement with computer-optimized efficiency. But Valeria didn't panic. The first corner would tell her everything she needed to know about her opponent's skill level. The circuit's opening turn was a tight right-hander that demanded commitment, a test of nerve as much as technique. Carlo braked hard, his Audi's advanced systems managing weight transfer and traction with electronic precision. Valeria carried her speed deeper into the corner, trusting physics and experience over technology, feeling the Mustang's classic suspension compress and release as she drifted through the apex. She exited the turn level with the Audi, her momentum perfectly preserved. Carlo's head turned slightly, visible through his side window. He'd expected to extend his lead through superior braking and corner speed. Instead, he'd just learned that the vintage Mustang could match his modern machinery where it mattered most. The second turn was a sweeping left that led into a long straightaway, and this was where the Mustang's raw power asserted itself. Valeria's foot pressed down, feeling the 429 cubic inch engine respond with savage enthusiasm. The acceleration was brutal and intoxicating, pushing her back into the seat as the speedometer climbed with violent purpose. She pulled alongside Carlo on the straight, then ahead, the Mustang's superior horsepower overwhelming the Audi's technical advantages. In her peripheral vision, she saw Carlo's expression shift from confidence to concentration as he realized his modern engineering wasn't the guaranteed advantage he'd assumed. The circuit's third section was a technical sequence. 3 connected corners that required precise line selection and throttle control. Valeria had studied the layout during her brief preparation time, had visualized the ideal path through each turn. Now she executed that vision with surgical precision, the Mustang responding to her inputs like an extension of her intentions. Behind her, Carlo pushed hard, trying to close the gap, but his aggression exceeded his skill. Valeria watched in her mirrors as the Audi's rear end stepped out in the second corner, Carlo's correction too abrupt, his recovery costing him precious momentum. She finished the first lap 3 car lengths ahead. The crowd's roar penetrated her focus, a wall of sound that validated what she already knew. She was faster. The Mustang was performing flawlessly. And Carlo Bellini was discovering that reputation meant nothing against superior execution. Lap 2 was clinical dominance. Valeria extended her lead through perfect line selection, optimal braking points, and an intimate understanding of the Mustang's capabilities. Carlo was fast, his Audi well prepared, but he was racing against someone who'd spent years pushing vehicles to their absolute limits. The third lap was a victory parade. Valeria crossed the finish line 7 car lengths ahead of the Audi, the Mustang's engine still singing its triumphant song. She brought the car to a controlled stop and stepped out into chaos. The crowd pressed forward, voices raised in appreciation and disbelief. Money changed hands as bets were settled. Tommy appeared beside her, his grin fierce with satisfaction. "That's my girl," he said quietly. "Welcome back, Nix." Valeria looked past the crowd toward Lucian, finding him standing exactly where he'd been before the race, his expression unreadable. Marcus Bellini approached, laughing. Despite his nephew's defeat. "Well, shit, Carlo, you just got destroyed by a woman driving a car older than you are. How does that feel?" Carlo's expression was tight with humiliation, but he managed a stiff nod toward Valeria. "You're better than I expected." "I'm exactly as good as I claimed to be," Valeria said evenly. "The problem wasn't my skill, it was your assumptions." Vincent Corso's son was next, his BMW M4, prepared with obvious care and significant investment. He was older than Carlo, maybe 28, with the kind of focused intensity that suggested he'd actually studied racing instead of just relying on natural talent and expensive equipment. "David Corso," he introduced himself, offering his hand without the performative strength Carlo had deployed. "I've heard stories about Nix for years. Never thought I'd get to race the legend." "What have you heard?" Valeria asked. "That you drove like physics was a suggestion rather than a law, that you could make a car do things that shouldn't be possible." David's smile was genuine. "After watching you destroy Carlo, I'm starting to believe the stories are true." "They are." "Then let's see if I can do better than he did." The second race was fundamentally different from the first. David Corso was genuinely skilled, his BMW perfectly set up, his racecraft sophisticated enough to pose a real challenge. When the flag dropped, he launched with precise timing, keeping pace with the Mustang through the opening corners. Valeria found herself working harder, pushing closer to the edge of the Mustang's capabilities. David anticipated her moves, defended his position intelligently, forced her to execute with absolute precision. This was real racing, 2 skilled drivers testing themselves against physics and each other. The first lap ended with Valeria barely ahead, maybe half a car length separating them. The crowd's energy intensified, sensing genuine competition rather than the one-sided demonstration Carlo had provided. David pushed harder on lap 2, taking risks that demonstrated both confidence and competence. He dove inside on a corner Valeria had owned in the previous race, forcing her to adjust her line, making her work for every inch of track position. But work was something Valeria understood. She'd built her reputation not on natural talent alone, but on the willingness to push harder, commit deeper, risk more than anyone else was willing to risk. David was skilled, but Valeria was relentless. She reclaimed the inside line on the circuit's tightest corner, feeling the Mustang's rear end slide precisely to the edge of adhesion, using the drift to pivot through the apex faster than the BMW's grip-focused approach allowed. David tried to follow, but his modern stability systems fought against the technique, his electronics preventing the controlled slide that Valeria had perfected through years of practice. The gap opened. Valeria pressed her advantage, each corner executed with millimeter precision, each straight exploiting the Mustang's power advantage. David fought brilliantly, but brilliance couldn't overcome the fundamental difference in skill level. She crossed the finish line 2 car lengths ahead. David approached after the race with genuine respect, his handshake firm and his smile rueful. "You're even better than the stories suggested. That was masterful driving." "You're good," Valeria said honestly. "Better than most people I've raced, but not better than you." "Not today." Vincent Corso joined his son, his expression complex. "Lucian, your wife just beat my best driver. I'm not sure whether to congratulate you or offer condolences." Lucian had moved closer during the second race, his attention fixed on Valeria's performance with the same focused intensity he brought to analyzing business opportunities and strategic threats. "Congratulations seem appropriate. I'm beginning to understand what Marcus meant about assets versus liabilities." Three more drivers challenged Valeria over the next hour, each bringing different vehicles and approaches. A Porsche 911 Turbo, driven by someone from the West Side Circuit. A modified Corvette Z06, whose owner had been talking trash about Nick's being overrated. A McLaren 720S, piloted by a professional driver who'd been brought in specifically to test whether Valeria's reputation was genuine. She beat them all. Not by identical margins, the professional in the McLaren pushed her harder than anyone except David Corso, but with consistent dominance that left no room for doubt or qualification. By the time the last race concluded, the crowd's energy had shifted from skepticism to awe. The collective understanding settling that Nix wasn't a myth or a lucky amateur, but genuinely one of the most dangerous drivers anyone present had ever witnessed. Valeria stepped out of the Mustang after the final race, her body humming with adrenaline and exhaustion. Tommy was there immediately, checking the car, ensuring that the sustained performance hadn't caused any problems. "She's perfect," he said after a moment. "Not even overheated. You drove this thing hard without abusing it. That's professional-level mechanical sympathy." Lucian approached as the crowd began to disperse, winners collecting their earnings, losers nursing their damaged pride. He stopped 3 feet from Valeria, his expression still unreadable, and for a moment they simply looked at each other. "Satisfied?" Valeria asked. "Impressed," Lucian corrected. "There's a difference." He glanced at the Mustang, then back at her. "You drove my car better than I ever could, better than I ever imagined it could be driven. It's a masterpiece. You chose well when you bought it." "I'm beginning to think I chose well in more ways than I realized." Lucian's voice was quiet enough that only she could hear. "We need to talk. Privately." They left the airfield in separate vehicles, Valeria driving the Mustang with Tommy beside her, Lucian following in his armored SUV with his security detail. The victory felt hollow somehow, incomplete despite the undeniable validation she'd achieved. She'd proven her skill, demonstrated her value, forced Lucian and his world to see her as something more than decorative. But the fundamental question remained unanswered. What happened now? The estate felt different when they returned, the silence less suffocating, the massive rooms less oppressive. Valeria found Lucian waiting in his office, the same space where their morning confrontation had occurred, but the energy was fundamentally changed. "Sit," he said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs. "Please." The addition of "please" was unusual. Lucian rarely asked for anything, his natural authority making requests sound like commands regardless of phrasing. Valeria sat, watching him carefully, trying to read the calculation happening behind his controlled expression. "I owe you an apology," Lucian said without preamble. "Several apologies, actually." That caught Valeria off guard. Lucian DeLuca didn't apologize. It wasn't weakness exactly, but it represented a kind of vulnerability that his world didn't encourage or reward. "For what specifically?" she asked. "For calling you hollow. For being bored with the very behavior I demanded. For marrying you without bothering to learn who you actually were." Lucian poured 2 glasses of whiskey, sliding one across the desk toward her. "For creating a situation where you felt like lying was safer than honesty." Valeria accepted the glass, feeling the weight of his words settle between them. "I could have told you the truth." "Could you? Really?" Lucian's expression was sharp. "Be honest, Valeria. If you'd walked up to me 6 months ago and said you used to be a legendary street racer, would I have believed you, or would I have dismissed it as a desperate attempt to seem interesting?" The brutal honesty of the question demanded an equally honest answer. "You would have dismissed it. You wanted someone refined and quiet. Nix was neither of those things." "Exactly. So you became what I wanted, and I punished you for succeeding." Lucian took a drink, his movements controlled despite the admission. "That's not just unfair. It's strategically idiotic." "Strategically?" "I run an empire that requires constant adaptation, creative problem solving, and people who can handle unexpected situations. What I don't need is someone who simply agrees with everything I say and never challenges my assumptions." Lucian's eyes met hers directly. "Today you demonstrated skills that are worth more than every connection your family brought to our marriage. You're an asset I didn't know I had because I was too focused on what I thought I wanted to notice what I actually needed." Valeria felt something shift in her chest, a careful hope that maybe this disaster could transform into something real. "What are you saying?" I'm saying our marriage has been a performance based on false premises. You pretended to be someone you're not. I pretended to be satisfied with that pretense, and we've both been miserable as a result. Lucian stood, walking to the window that overlooked the estate grounds. I want to start over, not with a divorce or an annulment, but with actual honesty about who we are and what we want from each other. And what do you want from me? The truth. All of it. Who you were before we married. What you gave up to become my wife. What you need to be happy instead of just compliant. He turned to face her. And in exchange, I'll give you the same honesty. About my work, my world, the reality of what being married to me actually means. Valeria studied him carefully, looking for manipulation or strategic positioning, but finding something that looked dangerously close to genuine. You could have handled this differently. Could have punished me for the embarrassment, asserted control, made an example out of me. I could have, but that would make you an enemy, and I'm starting to understand that having you as an enemy would be catastrophic. Lucian's smile was sharp. You stole my most valuable possession, publicly demonstrated that I don't know my own wife, and destroyed every driver in Chicago who thought they were better than you. If you can do all that while pretending to be a hollow statue, imagine what you could do if you actually tried. The observation was calculated to flatter while establishing new terms for their relationship. Valeria recognized the manipulation, but found herself appreciating the honesty of it. This was who Lucian was, a strategic thinker who saw every interaction as negotiation, every relationship as resource allocation. What does starting over actually look like? She asked. It looks like you stop hiding who you are. It looks like I stop expecting you to be something you're not. It looks like we figure out how to build a real partnership instead of a performance. Lucian returned to his desk, pulling up information on his computer. Marcus Chen sent me a business proposal an hour ago. He wants to formalize the underground racing circuit, make it legitimate enough to attract real sponsorship while maintaining its edge and exclusivity. He's offering you a position as primary driver and circuit designer. What did you tell him? I told him I'd discuss it with my wife and business partner. Lucian looked up from the screen. Because that's what you should be. Not my decorative accessory or my silent shadow, but someone who contributes meaningfully to the empire I'm building. Valeria felt her pulse quicken. This was more than reconciliation. This was recognition, the acknowledgement that she had value beyond her appearance and family connections. What about your reputation? She asked. Today helped, but there are still people who see me as a liability, a wife who publicly humiliates her husband. Let them. Lucian's expression was fierce now, the predatory intelligence that made him dangerous, fully engaged. Anyone stupid enough to think you're a liability after watching you destroy their best drivers isn't someone whose opinion matters. And anyone smart enough to recognize your value is someone I want as an ally rather than an enemy. He pulled up additional files displaying financial projections and strategic analyses. The underground racing circuit represents untapped revenue and influence. The logistics of moving vehicles and equipment requires exactly the kind of supply chain management that could serve other purposes. And having someone with your reputation operating in that world gives us access to information and connections that would otherwise be impossible to acquire. Valeria leaned forward, studying the projections. This was Lucian in his element, transforming chaos into opportunity, finding strategic advantage in unexpected places. And for the first time since their marriage, he was including her in the calculation, rather than expecting her to simply accept his decisions. You want to weaponize my racing, she said. I want to leverage your skills for mutual benefit. Lucian's correction was precise. You get to race legitimately, build the circuit you helped create in the underground, and use your talents without hiding. I get access to a world that's been closed to traditional business approaches, plus a partner who can handle situations I can't. Such as the problem we're going to have in about 3 hours when my head of security arrives, with questions about how you disabled the estate systems without triggering any alarms. Lucian's expression was serious now, because that's not something a decorative wife should be able to do. That's something a person with serious technical knowledge and operational experience could accomplish. The shift in tone caught Valeria's attention. You're concerned about security. I'm concerned about vulnerabilities I didn't know existed. If you could bypass our systems, other people could potentially do the same. I need to understand exactly how you did it, so we can prevent others from exploiting the same weaknesses. Valeria considered this request, recognizing it as both practical necessity and trust-building exercise. I used the access you gave me. The security system treats authorized users differently than potential threats. I knew the patrol patterns because I've watched them for 6 months. And I understand technical systems well enough to create a blind spot without triggering fail-safes. How well do you understand technical systems? Well enough that I used to bypass police surveillance during races, well enough that I could hack basic security protocols by the time I was 19. Well enough that Tommy used to joke I should be designing systems instead of defeating them. Lucian's expression shifted to something that looked like vindication. See, this is exactly what I'm talking about. You have skills that are worth significant money and strategic advantage, and you've been hiding them because you thought I wanted someone decorative and useless. You did want that. I thought I did. Turns out I was wrong about what I needed. He stood, moving around the desk to stand directly in front of her. So here's my proposal. We start over with actual honesty. You tell me who you really are, what you're actually capable of, what you want from this marriage. I'll do the same. And we build something real instead of continuing this performance that's making us both miserable. Valeria searched his face, looking for manipulation or hidden angles, but finding something that might actually be genuine interest. And if I want things you can't give me, then we negotiate, like adults, like partners. Lucian's hand extended, offering a handshake. What do you say? Ready to stop being a statue and start being a person? She took his hand, feeling the warmth of his grip, the strength tempered with careful control. I'm ready. But this goes both ways, Lucian. You don't get to demand honesty from me while keeping secrets about your work. Fair enough. He didn't release her hand immediately. Full disclosure, my empire is built on shipping, logistics, and strategic resource allocation. Some of it is perfectly legitimate. Some of it operates in gray areas that law enforcement would prefer to shut down. All of it requires constant management of competing interests, territorial disputes, and people who'd like to see me dead. I assumed that much. Did you assume that I've survived 3 assassination attempts in the past 2 years? Or that my head of security is probably compromised by someone trying to position themselves for a takeover? Or that the reason I married you wasn't just about family alliances, but because I needed someone whose presence would make me look stable and settled rather than vulnerable and isolated? The revelations landed with the weight of genuine trust. Pieces of truth that Lucian had been holding close suddenly offered up for inspection. Valeria's mind raced, processing implications and reassessing everything she thought she understood about their marriage. Who's compromised? She asked. I don't know yet, but someone with access to internal systems has been feeding information to rivals. Small things at first, shipment schedules, meeting times. But it's escalating. The security protocols you bypassed last night should have been impossible to defeat without inside knowledge. You think I'm involved? No. But I think you demonstrated that our security has weaknesses I need to address. Lucian finally released her hand, returning to his desk, but maintaining eye contact. Which brings me to another proposal. You're good at bypassing systems. Would you be willing to help me find and fix the vulnerabilities someone is exploiting? Valeria felt the weight of decision pressing down on her. This was the moment where she either committed to being a real partner in Lucian's world or maintained the careful distance that had characterized their marriage so far. Show me the security architecture, she said. Everything, access logs, system documentation, personnel files. If someone's exploiting weaknesses, I'll find them. Lucian's smile was genuine satisfaction. This is what I should have asked for 6 months ago. A partner who can actually help instead of someone who just looks good beside me at galas. They spent the next 2 hours reviewing the estate's security systems, with Valeria identifying vulnerabilities and suggesting fixes, while Lucian provided context about personnel and procedures. It was the first real collaboration of their marriage, the first time they'd worked together toward a common goal instead of existing in parallel orbits. Valeria found herself appreciating Lucian's strategic mind, the way he could see patterns and connections across disparate information. And Lucian seemed genuinely impressed by her technical knowledge, asking questions that suggested real interest rather than polite performance. Here, Valeria said, pointing to an access log entry. This shouldn't exist. User authentication happened at 2:47 a.m., but the guard's schedule shows that person was off duty. Either the log is falsified or someone used stolen credentials. Lucian leaned closer, studying the entry with focused intensity. That's my head of security's access code, Marcus Vega. He's been with me for 4 years. Is he here now? He's supposed to arrive at 6 to debrief about your unauthorized departure last night. Lucian checked his watch, which gives us 90 minutes to decide how we want to handle this. Confront him directly or set a trap? What would you suggest? The question felt like another test, Lucian assessing whether she could think tactically about situations that involved real danger. Valeria considered the options, weighing direct confrontation against strategic patience. Set a trap, she said finally. If Vega is compromised, confronting him just alerts whoever he's working for. Better to give him an opportunity to prove his loyalty or betray himself definitively. What kind of trap? Valeria's smile was sharp. The kind where we use the weaknesses I just identified to create a false vulnerability. Make it look like the system has a flaw that someone could exploit. Then watch to see if Vega takes the bait or reports it to whoever he's really working for. Lucian's expression was pure appreciation. You're dangerous. I think I might actually like being married to you. You haven't seen Dangerous yet. But Valeria found herself smiling despite the situation's gravity. This felt real in a way their marriage never had before. Two people working together, combining their different skills toward a common purpose. They spent the remaining time setting up the trap, creating what looked like an exploitable security flaw in the estate's perimeter monitoring. Anyone with technical knowledge could see the vulnerability. The question was whether Vega would report it or use it. Marcus Vega arrived exactly at 6, his expression carefully neutral as he was escorted to Lucian's office. He was built like someone who'd spent significant time in military service, early 50s with gray touching his temples and sharp eyes that missed very little. Sir, he said formally, I came as soon as I received your message. I understand there was an incident last night. There was. Lucian gestured toward Valeria, who was sitting in one of the leather chairs looking exactly like the decorative wife Vega expected to see. My wife borrowed my Mustang without permission. I need to understand how that was possible given our security protocols. Vega's attention shifted to Valeria, assessment clear in his gaze. Mrs. DeLuca, perhaps you could explain how you bypassed the garage security? I used the access code my husband gave me, Valeria said quietly, maintaining the performance of helpless wife. I didn't realize I was doing anything wrong. The access code wouldn't have disabled the motion sensors or camera feeds. Wouldn't it? Valeria's expression was carefully confused. But the panel said the system was in maintenance mode. Vega's eyes narrowed slightly. The system shouldn't enter maintenance mode without my authorization. Perhaps there's a flaw in the programming, Lucian suggested. Something that allows authorized users to trigger maintenance protocols accidentally. I'll investigate immediately. But Vega's body language had shifted subtly, tension bleeding into his shoulders. In the meantime, I recommend restricting Mrs. DeLuca's access to prevent similar incidents. That won't be necessary, Lucian said smoothly. I've already discussed appropriate behavior with my wife. She understands the importance of following proper procedures. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes, Vega asking careful questions while Lucian provided answers designed to seem helpful while revealing nothing useful. Throughout the exchange, Valeria maintained her performance of confused innocence, watching Vega's reactions with the same attention she brought to reading opponents during races. When Vega finally left, promising to review the security protocols and report back with recommendations, Lucian and Valeria sat in silence for a long moment. He's going to check that fake vulnerability, Valeria said quietly. Within the next 2 hours, Lucian agreed. And when he does, we'll know exactly who he's working for based on what he does with the information. What happens then? Then we decide whether he's worth saving or whether he needs to be eliminated. Lucian's voice was matter-of-fact, discussing potential murder with the same casual tone others might use for discussing dinner plans. Valeria should have been horrified. Instead, she found herself analyzing the tactical implications, considering what Vega's betrayal meant for the estate's security and Lucian's position within Chicago's underworld power structure. This is your world, she said, violence and strategic necessity. It is. Does that change your willingness to be part of it? Valeria thought about the question seriously, weighing comfort against truth, safety against authenticity. She'd spent 6 months pretending to be someone she wasn't, suppressing her real nature to fit into Lucian's world. But this collaborative problem solving, this strategic partnership, this recognition of her actual capabilities, felt more genuine than anything they'd shared before. "No," she said finally, "but I need you to understand something. I'm not going to be your weapon or your tool. If we're partners, that means equal input on decisions that affect both of us." "Fair enough." Lucian extended his hand again. "Partners. Equal input, honest communication, shared risk and reward." She took his hand, sealing the agreement. Partners. They sat together in Lucian's office as sunset painted the windows orange and gold, waiting to see whether Marcus Vega would prove his loyalty or betray the trust that had been placed in him. And for the first time since their wedding, Valeria felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. Not as a statue, not as a performance, but as herself. The wait lasted exactly 93 minutes. Valeria and Lucian monitored the security feeds from his office, watching as Marcus Vega moved through the estate's systems with the confidence of someone who'd built them. At first, his actions seemed routine, checking perimeter sensors, reviewing access logs, exactly what a diligent head of security would do after learning about a potential vulnerability. Then he accessed the false flaw they'd created, and his behavior changed. Vega pulled up the code underlying the garage security protocols, studying the manufactured weakness with focused intensity. His fingers moved across his tablet, and Valeria watched the network traffic logs light up with activity. "He's photographing the vulnerability," she said quietly. "Screen captures of the code, system architecture, access pathways." "Who's he sending them to?" Lucian's voice was controlled, but Valeria could hear the fury beneath the calm surface. She traced the encrypted data packets as they left the estate's network, following their path through several routing servers designed to obscure the ultimate destination. "Give me a minute." Her fingers flew across Lucian's computer, deploying tools she'd used during her racing days to track rivals and avoid law enforcement. The encryption was sophisticated but not unbreakable, especially since Vega had prioritized speed over complete security. "Got it," Valeria said, pulling up the final destination. "The data is going to an IP address registered to a holding company called Meridian Logistics." Lucian's expression went absolutely cold. "Antonio Ferrara's front company. That confirms it." "Who's Ferrara?" "Someone who's been trying to take control of my shipping routes for the past year. Someone I thought I'd neutralize through a treaty negotiated 3 months ago." Lucian stood, his movements precise and controlled despite the obvious rage. "Someone who apparently decided to bypass our agreement by corrupting my head of security." Valeria watched as Vega closed out of the security systems, erasing traces of his access with practiced efficiency. He'd done this before, she realized. This wasn't his first betrayal, just the first time he'd been caught. "What are you going to do?" she asked. "What I should have done months ago when the intelligence leaks started." Lucian pulled out his phone, typing a message with controlled precision. "But first, I need to understand the full scope of the betrayal. If Vega's been feeding Ferrara information, I need to know what else has been compromised." He made 3 phone calls in rapid succession, his voice calm and authoritative as he summoned specific people to the estate. Valeria recognized 2 of the names, Vincent Corso and Marcus Bellini, the men who'd witnessed her racing demonstration. The third name was unfamiliar, someone called Santos, who apparently handled Lucian's most sensitive operations. "They'll be here in an hour," Lucian said, ending the final call. "In the meantime, I need you to do something for me." "What?" "Access Vega's personal files, everything stored on the estate's servers under his credentials. If he's been working for Ferrara, there will be evidence, communication logs, file transfers, anything that shows the pattern of betrayal." Valeria felt a spike of anxiety. That's different from bypassing garage security. That's actively hacking into someone's private information. "It is. And I wouldn't ask if the stakes weren't this high." Lucian's eyes met hers directly. "Ferrara doesn't just want my shipping routes. He wants me dead. If Vega has given him access to estate security, then every moment I'm here, I'm vulnerable. I need to know exactly what information has been compromised so I can defend against whatever Ferrara is planning." The brutal honesty of the situation settled over Valeria like cold water. This wasn't abstract strategy or theoretical danger. This was her husband explaining that someone wanted to kill him and had corrupted the very systems designed to keep him safe. "Show me Vega's access credentials," she said. They worked together for the next 40 minutes, Valeria navigating through security protocols while Lucian provided context about personnel and procedures. She found the evidence quickly, encrypted files hidden in system directories that most people would never think to check, communication logs that had been deleted from primary servers but remained in backup archives, financial transfers that revealed a pattern of payment from Meridian Logistics. "He's been working for Ferrara for at least 8 months, Valeria said, pulling up a timeline of suspicious activity. Small betrayals at first, meeting schedules, routine shipment information. But it escalated 3 months ago, right after your treaty negotiation." "What escalated?" "He started providing real-time security updates. Guard rotation schedules, patrol patterns, blind spots in the perimeter monitoring." Valeria's stomach tightened as she understood the implications. He was helping Ferrara plan an assault on the estate. Lucian's jaw clenched, the only visible sign of his fury. "When?" "The files don't specify, but there's a notation here." She pulled up an encrypted message that she'd partially decoded. "Something about optimal window and minimal resistance. It's dated for tomorrow night." "Tomorrow?" Lucian's voice was absolutely cold. "During the charity gala I'm hosting, when the estate will be full of guests and Ferrara's people could blend in with catering staff and security personnel." The pieces clicked into place with terrifying clarity. Ferrara hadn't just corrupted Lucian's head of security. He'd orchestrated an elaborate plan to attack when Lucian would be most vulnerable, surrounded by civilians, unable to respond with the full force his position commanded. "We need to cancel the gala," Valeria said. "No, we'll let it proceed exactly as planned." "Lucian, if Ferrara is planning an assault, then we'll be ready for him." Lucian's expression was predatory now, the strategic mind that had built his empire fully engaged. "We know what he's planning. We know when he's planning to strike. That gives us the advantage." Valeria studied his face, seeing the calculation happening behind his eyes. "You want to turn his ambush into a trap." "I want to end this permanently. Ferrara has been a thorn in my side for too long, hiding behind treaties and front companies while undermining my operations. Tomorrow night, he'll reveal himself. And when he does, I'll eliminate the threat completely." The casual discussion of violence should have disturbed Valeria. Instead, she found herself analyzing the tactical situation, considering what resources they'd need and how to position people for maximum effectiveness. "What do you need from me?" she asked. Lucian's smile was sharp and genuine. "Everything you're willing to give. Your technical skills to monitor security systems and identify threats. Your racing abilities in case we need fast extraction. Your intelligence to help me plan a defense that Ferrara won't see coming." He paused, his expression softening slightly. "And your partnership. Because I'm done facing threats alone when I have someone beside me who's just as dangerous as I am." Before Valeria could respond, the office door opened and Vincent Corso entered, followed closely by Marcus Bellini and a third man who moved with the controlled precision of serious military training. This had to be Santos, lean, scarred, with eyes that assessed threats with professional detachment. "Lucian," Vincent said, his tone concerned. "Your message suggested urgency. What's happening?" "Antonio Ferrara is planning to kill me tomorrow night during the charity gala. My head of security has been feeding him intelligence for the past 8 months, and I need all of you to help me turn his assassination attempt into his funeral." Lucian's voice was a matter of fact, delivering catastrophic news with the same calm he might use to discuss weather. The three men absorbed this information with varying reactions. Vincent looked shocked, Marcus appeared grimly unsurprised, and Santos simply nodded as if confirming something he'd already suspected. "Vega's compromised?" Santos asked, his voice carrying a slight accent that suggested South American origins. "Completely. My wife uncovered the evidence." Lucian gestured toward Valeria. "Gentlemen, I should mention that Valeria isn't just the woman who destroyed your best drivers this afternoon. She's also the person who just saved my life by identifying a security breach I didn't know existed." Vincent's eyebrows climbed. "Your wife hacked Vega's files?" "Among other talents I'm still discovering." Lucian pulled up the evidence Valeria had compiled, displaying it on the large monitor mounted behind his desk. This is the scope of the betrayal. 8 months of intelligence sharing, culminating in what appears to be a coordinated assault planned for tomorrow evening. Santos moved closer to the monitor, studying the information with professional focus. Ferrara's people will infiltrate as service staff, probably 20 to 30 soldiers mixed in with legitimate workers. They'll wait until the gala is in full swing, then strike when you're surrounded by guests and unable to mount an effective defense. That would be his plan if we didn't know about it, Lucian said. But we do know, which means we can prepare. Marcus Bellini leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. You're planning a counter-ambush. Let Ferrara's people infiltrate, then eliminate them when they reveal themselves. Exactly. But I need to do it without endangering the civilian guests, which requires careful coordination and people I trust absolutely. Lucian looked at each man in turn. Are you willing to help me end this? Vincent nodded immediately. Ferrara's been encroaching on my territories as well. If you eliminate him, that solves problems for both of us. I'm in, Marcus said. Though I have to say, Lucian, your taste in wives has significantly improved my opinion of your judgment. Anyone who can drive like she did this afternoon and hack security systems deserves respect. Santos simply nodded, his agreement requiring no verbal confirmation. Good. Lucian pulled up architectural plans of the estate, the building's layout spread across the monitor. Then, let's plan how to turn my home into a killing field that Ferrara won't survive. They spent the next 3 hours strategizing, Valeria contributing observations about security vulnerabilities and potential defensive positions. Her racing experience translated surprisingly well to tactical planning. Both required understanding of sightlines, timing, and how to position resources for maximum effectiveness. The main ballroom has 4 entrances, she said, pointing to the architectural plans. Ferrara's people will need to control all of them to prevent guests from escaping and to block your reinforcements. That means they'll split their forces, probably 5 to 7 soldiers per entrance. Which makes them vulnerable to concentrated counterattack, Santos observed. If we position our people correctly, we can eliminate them section by section before they realize what's happening. What about Vega? Vincent asked. He'll be coordinating estate security during the gala. If he's working for Ferrara, he'll position your people where they'll be least effective. Let him, Lucian said. I'll assign Santos to manage actual security while Vega thinks he's in control. By the time he realizes the trap, it'll be too late. Valeria listened to them plan violence with the same strategic focus she brought to analyzing race circuits. There was something darkly beautiful about the precision, the way they anticipated moves and countermoves like chess players working through complex endgames. What about the guests? She asked. Innocent people who will be caught in the crossfire. We evacuate them before the shooting starts, Lucian said. Fire alarm, staged emergency, whatever gets them out safely. Ferrara's people will reveal themselves when they try to prevent the evacuation. That's when we strike. The plan solidified over the next hour, details refined, backup strategies developed, resources allocated. When Vincent, Marcus, and Santos finally left to begin their preparations, Valeria and Lucian were alone again in the office that had become their war room. You should rest, Lucian said, exhaustion finally showing in the tension around his eyes. Tomorrow will be intense. I'm not tired. Valeria was still buzzing with adrenaline, her mind racing through scenarios and contingencies. I'm thinking about what happens if something goes wrong. If Ferrara's assault succeeds, if the plan fails, if I die tomorrow night, and you become a widow. Lucian finished quietly. You're thinking about what that would mean for you. I'm thinking about what it would mean for us, for this partnership we just started building. Valeria met his eyes directly. I don't want to lose you just when I'm starting to understand who you actually are. Lucian's expression softened, genuine emotion breaking through his tactical composure. I don't plan on dying tomorrow, but if I do, everything I have becomes yours. The estate, the businesses, the empire. You'd inherit complete control. I don't want your empire. I want... Valeria stopped, surprised by the intensity of her own feeling. I want the partnership you offered, the honest communication, the shared risk, the chance to be myself instead of a performance. Then help me survive tomorrow, and I promise you'll have exactly that. Lucian stood, crossing to where she sat, and offered his hand. Come on, if we're going to face an assassination attempt, we should at least get a few hours of sleep first. They walked upstairs together, and for the first time since their wedding, when they reached the master bedroom, there was no awkwardness or careful distance. Lucian pulled Valeria close, his kiss fierce and urgent, carrying all the emotion they'd been suppressing for 6 months. I'm sorry, he said against her hair, for everything, for not seeing you, for being bored with what I demanded, for making you feel like you had to hide who you are. I'm sorry too, for lying, for pretending, for stealing your car. Valeria smiled despite the gravity of their situation. Though I'm not actually sorry about the racing. That was necessary. It was perfect. Violent and beautiful and absolutely terrifying. Lucian's hands framed her face, his expression serious. Stay alive tomorrow. Whatever happens, whatever you need to do, promise me you'll survive. Only if you promise the same. Deal. They made love with desperate intensity. 6 months of frustration and suppressed desire finally finding release. Afterward, Valeria lay in Lucian's arms, feeling his heartbeat steady against her cheek, and tried not to think about the fact that tomorrow, this warmth might be replaced by coldness and loss. Tell me about Nix, Lucian said into the darkness. Not the racer, but the person. Who were you before you became my wife? Valeria thought about how to answer, searching for words to explain a life that felt simultaneously distant and immediately present. I was someone who couldn't sit still. Someone who needed speed and danger to feel alive. My family hated it. The racing, the risk, the way I kept choosing chaos over safety. Is that why you agreed to marry me? To escape that life? Partially, but also because I thought maybe I could be someone different. Someone refined and controlled instead of wild and reckless. She laughed quietly. Turns out, I'm not very good at being someone else. Good, because the person you actually are is far more interesting than the person you were pretending to be. Lucian's arms tightened around her. After tomorrow, assuming we both survive, I want you to teach me to drive properly. Not the careful, controlled way I've been treating the Mustang, but the way you drove it. The way it was meant to be driven. You want me to teach you to race? I want you to teach me to see the world the way you see it, fast and dangerous and absolutely alive. Valeria kissed him, feeling something shift between them. Not love exactly, not yet, but the foundation that love might build on given time and honesty and shared survival. They slept fitfully, waking periodically as anxiety spiked and subsided. When dawn finally came, painting the bedroom windows with pale light, Valeria felt simultaneously exhausted and electric with anticipation. The day passed in careful preparation. Lucian coordinated with Santos, positioning loyal security personnel in strategic locations while allowing Vega to think he was still in control. Vincent and Marcus arrived with additional soldiers, men whose loyalty had been tested and proven over years of service. Valeria spent hours reviewing security feeds and communication protocols, familiarizing herself with every camera angle and sensor position. She felt like she was preparing for a race, the same careful attention to detail, the same visualization of optimal paths, the same understanding that success required both planning and adaptability. Ready? Tommy Rodriguez appeared in the garage where Valeria was checking the Mustang for the 3rd time. I heard about tonight. Lucian asked me to position the car for fast extraction if needed. From whom? From everyone. Marcus Chen, Santos, even Vincent Corso. Tommy's expression was serious. They're all expecting violence. They want you to have an escape route. I'm not running. Didn't think you would, but having options is never a bad idea. Tommy handed her a small device that looked like a modified key fob. Remote engine start. If things go bad, you can have the Mustang running from anywhere in the estate, just in case. Valeria pocketed the device, appreciating the gesture even as she hoped she wouldn't need it. Thanks, Tommy. Stay alive, Nix. You just got interesting again. Would be ashamed to lose you now. The charity gala began at 7. Guests arriving in expensive vehicles, dressed in formal wear that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Valeria stood beside Lucian in the main ballroom, playing her role as gracious hostess, while her awareness tracked every service worker, every security guard, every person whose presence felt slightly wrong. She'd counted 15 potential threats so far. men whose body language suggested military training despite their catering uniforms. Santos had identified another 8, and Vincent's people had flagged 5 more. 28 infiltrators mixed among legitimate staff, exactly as predicted. Lucian worked the room with practiced charm, shaking hands and accepting congratulations for the charity initiative the gala was supposedly supporting. But Valeria could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his eyes constantly tracked positions and angles. At 8:30, Marcus Vega appeared beside Lucian, his expression professionally neutral. "Sir, there's a situation in the North Wing that requires your attention. Security matter." "What kind of situation?" Lucian asked casually. "Better discussed privately." This was it. Vega making his move, trying to isolate Lucian from the crowd and his protection. Valeria felt her pulse kick up, adrenaline flooding her system. "I'll come with you," she said, her tone carrying just enough wifely concern to seem natural. Vega's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That won't be necessary, Mrs. DeLuca." "Nevertheless, I insist." She linked her arm through Lucian's, maintaining her performance of decorative wife, while her free hand found the small blade she'd concealed in the folds of her gown. They followed Vega through the ballroom toward the North Wing, Valeria tracking their route and noting how it led them away from Santos and the other security personnel they trusted. Vega was isolating them, leading them into whatever trap Ferrara had prepared. "Marcus," Lucian said conversationally as they entered a quieter hallway, "how long have you been planning to betray me?" Vega stopped walking, his hand moving toward his concealed weapon. "Sir? Please don't insult my intelligence. I know about Ferrara, about the intelligence you've been feeding him, about tonight's planned assault." Lucian's voice was calm, almost gentle. "I'm giving you one opportunity to explain why I shouldn't kill you right now." Vega's expression shifted from professional neutrality to cold calculation. "Because I'm not alone, and because Ferrara's people are already in position." On cue, men appeared from doorways flanking the hall. 4 of Ferrara's soldiers, weapons drawn, trapping Lucian and Valeria between them and Vega. The choreography was perfect, the ambush precisely executed. Except Lucian was smiling. "You're right," he said. "You're not alone. But neither am I." Santos emerged from a side corridor, followed by 6 of Lucian's most trusted soldiers. They moved with lethal efficiency, weapons already drawn, positioning themselves to cut off Ferrara's men from any escape route. Vega's expression went absolutely cold. "You knew." "I knew everything, thanks to my wife, who's significantly better at security analysis than you ever were." Lucian's hand moved to his own concealed weapon, drawing it with practiced ease. "The question now is whether you cooperate and tell me exactly what Ferrara has planned, or whether Santos puts a bullet through your skull and I figure it out myself." "Ferrara's already won," Vega said, his voice tight with suppressed rage. "Even if you kill me, even if you stop this assault, he's destroyed your reputation. Everyone in Chicago knows your wife is Nix. They know you didn't know who you married. They're already questioning your judgment, your control, your ability to lead." Actually, they're doing the opposite." Lucian's smile widened. "See, after my wife demonstrated her skills yesterday, people started wondering what other assets I've been hiding, what other capabilities I have access to that my enemies don't know about." "You didn't destroy my reputation, Marcus. You enhanced it by proving I have resources and allies that are far more dangerous than anyone suspected." Valeria watched understanding dawn on Vega's face. The realization that his betrayal hadn't weakened Lucian, but had inadvertently strengthened him by revealing capabilities his enemies hadn't anticipated. "Last chance," Santos said quietly, his weapon aimed with absolute steadiness at Vega's head. "Cooperate or die." Vega's shoulders slumped, defeat settling over him like a physical weight. "The main assault comes at 9:30. Fire alarm is cover, then systematic execution of key targets. Ferrara himself is outside in an armored convoy, waiting to move in once you're dead." "Where's the convoy positioned?" Lucian demanded. "North Access Road, hidden in the service area." Vega's voice was mechanical now. The fight drained out of him. 20 vehicles, maybe 60 soldiers total. Lucian looked at Santos. "Take him to the basement. Secure him. We'll decide what to do with him later." As Santos's people moved to restrain Vega and eliminate the 4 soldiers who'd tried to ambush them, Lucian pulled out his phone and typed a rapid message. Vincent and Marcus are mobilizing their forces. If Ferrara wants a war, we'll give him one he won't survive. The guests, Valeria said. We need to evacuate them before this turns into a battlefield. Already arranged. Lucian checked his watch. In 3 minutes, the fire alarm will activate. My people will guide guests to the south exits while Ferrara's infiltrators reveal themselves trying to prevent the evacuation. That's when we strike. The next 3 minutes felt eternal, time stretching as Valeria and Lucian returned to the ballroom. She could see Ferrara's people positioned throughout the space, waiting for their signal, unaware that their plan had been compromised. Then the fire alarm screamed to life, and chaos erupted exactly as predicted. Lucian's security personnel moved with practiced efficiency, guiding panicked guests toward the designated south exits while maintaining calm authority. The civilian evacuation proceeded exactly as planned, well-dressed men and women hurrying through corridors with confusion but not terror, believing they were responding to a simple fire alarm rather than an orchestrated combat scenario. Ferrara's infiltrators revealed themselves within seconds, exactly as Lucian had predicted. Men in catering uniforms abandoned their pretense, reaching for concealed weapons, moving to block exit routes and isolate key targets. But they were moving into a trap they didn't know existed. Santos's team struck first, eliminating 3 infiltrators near the ballroom's main entrance with suppressed weapons that barely registered over the fire alarm's wail. The bodies dropped silently, dragged into side rooms before anyone except Ferrara's remaining people noticed. Valeria tracked the unfolding violence with the same focused awareness she brought to racing, her mind calculating positions and trajectories, identifying threats and opportunities. She'd positioned herself near Lucian, but not directly beside him, giving them both room to maneuver if the situation required separation. East corridor, she said quietly, her voice cutting through the alarm's noise. 4 more moving to flank us. Lucian's hand moved to his concealed weapon with practiced ease. Vincent's people should intercept them before they reach our position. The prediction proved accurate. Vincent Corso's soldiers appeared from a connecting hallway, engaging Ferrara's men with brutal efficiency. The suppressed gunfire sounded like hard coughs beneath the fire alarm, violence rendered almost subtle by careful weapon selection. The ballroom emptied rapidly, the last civilian guest shepherded out by Lucian's legitimate security personnel. Within 3 minutes, the massive space stood nearly empty except for the handful of Ferrara's infiltrators who hadn't yet realized their mission had been compromised. Now, Lucian said into his phone. The fire alarm cut off abruptly, the sudden silence almost shocking after the sustained noise. In that silence, Santos's voice echoed through the ballroom's sound system with cold authority. Ferrara's people, you have 10 seconds to surrender your weapons and lie face down on the floor. Anyone still standing after 10 seconds will be considered a hostile target and eliminated accordingly. Valeria watched the remaining infiltrators process this announcement, saw the moment they understood their ambush had become a killing field. 2 dropped their weapons immediately, self-preservation overriding loyalty. 3 others made the catastrophic decision to fight. The resulting violence was brief and absolute. Santos's team had superior positioning, better intel, and the tactical advantage of knowing exactly where every threat was located. The 3 who chose resistance died within seconds, their bodies hitting the marble floor with sounds that would haunt Valeria's memory. Clear, Santos reported through Lucian's phone. 28 infiltrators neutralized or captured. 0 friendly casualties. The estate is secure. What about Ferrara's convoy? Lucian asked. Marcus Bellini's people have them surrounded on the north access road. They're waiting for your orders. Lucian looked at Valeria, his expression seeking input rather than simply informing her of his decision. The gesture was small but significant, recognition that she was truly his partner in this moment rather than someone to be protected or excluded. Ferrara came here to kill you, Valeria said quietly. If you let him leave, he'll just try again. More carefully next time with better intelligence, learning from tonight's failure. So you're suggesting I kill him? I'm suggesting you end the threat permanently, whatever that requires. Valeria met his eyes directly. You asked for my honest input. That's my assessment. Lucian nodded slowly, something like respect and grief mixing in his expression. I wanted to avoid this. Ferrara and I used to be allies before ambition made him reckless. Nostalgia doesn't stop bullets, Santos observed from nearby, his tone matter of fact. And sentiment doesn't protect territory. No, it doesn't. Lucian lifted his phone again, his voice steady despite the weight of what he was ordering. Marcus, tell Ferrara I'm willing to negotiate. Bring him into the estate under flag of truce. He gets safe passage in, we discuss terms, and he gets safe passage out if we reach agreement. Santos's eyebrows climbed. You're actually going to negotiate with him after he tried to kill you? No, I'm going to make him think I'm negotiating while we eliminate every advantage he has. Lucian's smile was cold and calculating. Bring him into our territory, separate him from his convoy, get him to reveal his full plan and his remaining allies. Then we decide whether he's worth saving or whether this ends permanently. The tactical elegance of the approach impressed Valeria, despite its ruthlessness. Lucian wasn't just responding to the immediate threat. He was using this moment to extract maximum intelligence about his enemies while maintaining the moral high ground of offering negotiation. Marcus Bellini's response came through the phone seconds later. Ferrara accepted. He's bringing 5 bodyguards. Says he wants to discuss peace terms. Should arrive in 15 minutes. Perfect. Santos, prepare the study. I want surveillance on every angle, weapons positioned where we can respond if he tries anything, and escape routes blocked without being obvious about it. The next 15 minutes passed in controlled preparation. The ballroom's bodies were removed, evidence of violence scrubbed away with efficiency that suggested Lucian's people had done this before. The study was arranged to look like a negotiation space while actually being a carefully designed trap. Cameras hidden in artwork and decorative fixtures, weapons concealed within reach but out of immediate sight. Valeria changed out of her formal gown into more practical clothing, dark pants, fitted jacket, boots that would allow her to run or fight if necessary. When she returned to the study, Lucian looked her over with approval. You're not hiding in the background anymore, he observed. No. If we're partners, that means I stand beside you during the dangerous moments, not just the successful ones. I could order you to stay somewhere safe. You could, but you won't, because you know I'm more useful here than locked away. Valeria moved to stand slightly behind and to the left of where Lucian would sit, a position that gave her clear sightlines while not appearing overtly threatening. Besides, Ferrara doesn't know what I'm capable of. That might be useful if this goes wrong. Lucian's smile was genuine warmth cutting through the tension. You know what I'm realizing? Having you as a partner is terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. I never know whether you're going to save my life or give me a heart attack from stress. Probably both, simultaneously. Their brief moment of levity was interrupted by Santos's voice through the security system. Ferrara is at the main entrance. 5 bodyguards as promised, all armed but not overtly hostile. Bring them to the study, Lucian ordered. Remind them that this is neutral ground and violence would be inadvisable. Antonio Ferrara entered the study 3 minutes later, flanked by his bodyguards, his presence filling the room with dangerous charisma. He was older than Lucian, maybe 50, with silver threading through his dark hair and the kind of commanding presence that came from decades of surviving Chicago's underworld. His attention fixed on Lucian first, assessing and calculating, then shifted to Valeria with obvious surprise. Lucian, he said, his voice carrying a slight Italian accent, I appreciate you agreeing to meet, and this must be the famous Nix I've been hearing about. My wife, Valeria, Lucian corrected smoothly, who also happens to be Nix, yes. Quite the revelation. Your head of security provided useful intelligence, but he somehow failed to mention that your decorative wife was actually a legendary street racer. Ferrara's smile didn't reach his eyes. Makes me wonder what else Marcus Vega got wrong. Everything, as it turned out. But I'm sure you've already realized that, given how completely your assault failed. Lucian gestured toward the chairs arranged around his desk. Please, sit. Let's discuss why you thought killing me was a better strategy than honoring our treaty. Ferrara's bodyguards positioned themselves around the room with professional competence, their attention tracking potential threats. Valeria noted with satisfaction that Santos had positioned Lucian's people perfectly. For every one of Ferrara's guards, 2 of their own were positioned with superior angles and clearer fields of fire. The treaty was broken the moment you expanded into territories we'd agreed were neutral, Ferrara said, sitting with careful composure. My people reported shipments moving through districts that should have been off limits. Those reports were fabricated, probably by the same person who fed you the intelligence that led to tonight's disaster. Lucian pulled up documentation on his computer, turning the screen so Ferrara could see. These are the actual shipping manifests. Every route, every territory, completely within our agreed boundaries. Ferrara studied the information, his expression tightening as he recognized the truth. Vega falsified the intelligence. Vega wanted us to destroy each other so he could pick up the pieces. He fed you lies about my territorial expansion while simultaneously feeding me false information about your movements. He manufactured a conflict that didn't need to exist. Lucian's voice carried an edge of genuine frustration. We've been played, Antonio, both of us. The revelation settled over the room, reframing the past year's escalating tensions. Valeria watched Ferrara process the information, saw the moment he understood how thoroughly Vega had manipulated them both. Why should I believe you? Ferrara asked finally. Because I'm still alive, which means I knew about tonight's assault in advance. If I wanted you dead, your convoy would already be destroyed and we wouldn't be having this conversation. Lucian leaned forward, his posture suggesting earnest negotiation rather than confrontation. I brought you here because I need to know if you're salvageable. If we can rebuild the alliance we had before Vega corrupted it, or if tonight's betrayal means we're enemies permanently. Ferrara's jaw worked, pride warring with pragmatism. You're offering peace after I tried to kill you? I'm offering a chance to fix what Vega broke, but I need something from you first. What? Everything. Every piece of intelligence Vega gave you, every plan you made based on that intelligence, every ally you brought into this conflict. I need complete transparency about how deep this corruption goes so I can clean it out permanently. The demand was absolute, requiring Ferrara to expose himself completely, to trust that Lucian wouldn't use the information against him. It was a test of whether genuine partnership was possible or whether their relationship had been damaged beyond repair. Ferrara looked at his bodyguards, then back at Lucian, then finally at Valeria. Your wife, Nyx. Vega told me she was a weakness, someone I could use against you. That was a lie too, wasn't it? Completely, Lucian said. She's the strongest asset I have, the person who uncovered Vega's betrayal and saved my life tonight. Then I owe her my gratitude for preventing me from making a catastrophic mistake. Ferrara's attention fixed on Valeria directly. Thank you for being smarter than the men trying to kill each other in your name. Valeria inclined her head slightly, accepting the acknowledgement while maintaining her strategic positioning. Thank you for being wise enough to negotiate instead of fighting when the situation changed. The exchange seemed to satisfy something in Ferrara's assessment. He turned back to Lucian, his shoulders settling as decision crystallized. All right, you want transparency? I'll give you transparency. But I need the same from you. No more secrets, no more suspicions. If we're rebuilding this alliance, it has to be on genuine trust. Agreed. Lucian extended his hand across the desk. Partners again, like we should have been all along. Ferrara shook it, the gesture carrying weight beyond simple protocol. Partners. They spent the next 2 hours going through everything. Vega's intelligence, Ferrara's plans, the network of people who'd been drawn into the manufactured conflict. Valeria listened and learned, understanding the scope of Chicago's underworld power structure, seeing how territories and influence were negotiated and maintained. What emerged was a picture of systematic manipulation, Vega orchestrating conflicts between multiple factions while positioning himself to benefit from the resulting chaos. He'd been building his own empire using other people's resources, creating a situation where everyone lost except him. He's more dangerous than I realized, Ferrara said after reviewing the full scope. If you hadn't caught him tonight, he would have succeeded in destroying both our organizations. Which is why he can't be allowed to survive, Lucian said quietly, or to communicate with anyone who might continue his work. Ferrara nodded, understanding the implication. Santos should handle it. Clean, professional, no traces. Already arranged. Lucian checked his phone, reading a message that had just arrived. Vincent Corso found 3 more of Vega's co-conspirators in the security organization. They're being questioned now. How many people did he corrupt? We're still determining that, but it's clear he had a network, not just isolated betrayal. Lucian looked at Valeria. This is going to take weeks to clean out completely. Maybe months. Then we have months of work ahead of us, Valeria said simply. Partners handle problems together. Ferrara stood, his bodyguards immediately moving to flank him. Lucian, I came here planning to kill you. Instead, you've given me back an alliance I thought was lost. That's either brilliant strategy or dangerous optimism. It's pragmatism. Dead allies can't help me defend against future threats. Living allies who understand we were both manipulated can become stronger partnerships than before. Lucian stood as well, offering his hand again. Go home, Antonio. Secure your territories, clean out anyone who might be compromised, and let's rebuild what Vega tried to destroy. One question before I leave, Ferrara said, accepting the handshake. Your wife, Nyx, is she available for contract work? Lucian's expression went absolutely cold. No. I'm not trying to steal her. I'm asking if she'd be willing to help secure my supply lines. Professional consultation, generous compensation, completely above board. Ferrara looked at Valeria directly. Your racing skills translate to logistics and security. I could use someone with your capabilities. Valeria glanced at Lucian, seeing possessive fury warring with tactical calculation in his expression. I appreciate the offer, but I'm already committed to working with my husband. Perhaps we could discuss consultancy arrangements that involve both of us? The diplomatic answer seemed to satisfy Ferrara, while not committing to anything specific. He smiled, genuine warmth breaking through his calculating exterior. Smart and tactical. Lucian, you married far better than you knew. I'm becoming increasingly aware of that fact. After Ferrara and his people departed, the estate settled into post-violence quiet, the kind of silence that followed adrenaline and combat. Valeria found herself in the garage, standing beside the Mustang, processing everything that had happened over the past 48 hours. She'd gone from hollow statue to Lucian's most valuable partner in less than 2 days, had faced death, orchestrated counter-ambushes, and helped negotiate peace between warring crime families. The transformation was so complete that she barely recognized herself. You're thinking too hard, Lucian said, appearing beside her with 2 glasses of whiskey. I can hear your brain working from across the house. I'm thinking about what happens now, after tonight, after Ferrara, after everything changes. Valeria accepted the glass, appreciating the burn of expensive liquor. We can't go back to what we were before. No, we can't, but we can build something better. Lucian leaned against the Mustang, his body language more relaxed than she'd seen in months. I talked to Marcus Chen while you were up here. He's still interested in formalizing the underground racing circuit. Thinks having you as the face of the operation would attract serious sponsorship. What did you tell him? That I'd discuss it with my business partner and get back to him. Lucian's smile was soft. Because that's what you are now. Not my wife, who I make decisions for, but my partner, who I make decisions with. Valeria felt warmth spread through her chest, something that might eventually become love if given time and nurturing. I want to race again. Not just occasionally, but seriously. Building circuits, mentoring other drivers, pushing the boundaries of what's possible. Then do it, with my full support and resources. Lucian set down his glass, pulling Valeria close. But I have one condition. What? Teach me. Not just how to drive fast, but how to see the world the way you see it. I want to understand what makes you come alive. Valeria kissed him, tasting whiskey and promise, and the beginning of something real. Deal. But you have to teach me your world too. The empire, the strategies, all of it. If I'm going to be your partner, I need to understand everything. Fair exchange. Lucian's hands framed her face, his expression more open than she'd ever seen. I love you. I should have said it before tonight. Should have realized it when you stole my car and proved you were everything I didn't know I needed. But I'm saying it now. I love you, Valeria DeLuca. Nyx, whoever you are and whoever you're becoming. The words settled over her, warm and terrifying and absolutely right. I love you too, even though you called me a statue and got bored with the person you demanded I become. I'll spend the rest of our marriage making up for that stupidity. Good, because I'm keeping a list, and it's getting quite long. They laughed together, the sound echoing through their garage, and Valeria felt something fundamental shift inside her. She'd started this journey as someone hiding her true self, suppressing her capabilities to fit into a role that felt increasingly suffocating. Now she stood beside her husband as a full partner, recognized and valued for exactly who she was. The next 3 weeks were intense reconstruction, systematically identifying and eliminating Vega's network of corruption. Santos handled the former head of security personally, and Lucian never asked for details about what that handling involved. Some questions were better left unasked. Valeria threw herself into the security overhaul, redesigning protocols and implementing systems that would prevent future infiltration. Her technical skills, combined with her understanding of how to bypass security measures, made her uniquely qualified to create defenses that actually worked, rather than just appearing secure. She also began working with Marcus Chen on the underground racing circuit's legitimization, designing tracks that challenged drivers while maintaining safety margins, recruiting talent, and establishing the kind of professional operation that could attract mainstream sponsorship without losing its edge. Lucian watched her flourish, seeing the woman he'd married transform from suppressed potential into realized power. She was magnificent in her element, confident, strategic, absolutely ruthless when the situation demanded it. 6 months after the charity gala that had nearly been his funeral, Lucian stood in the study that had hosted his negotiation with Ferrara, reviewing financial reports that showed his empire running more efficiently than ever before. Valeria's contributions to logistics, security, and strategic planning had proven invaluable, her racing instincts translating surprisingly well to business operations. "Are you coming?" Valeria appeared in the doorway, dressed in fitted racing gear that hugged her curves, her hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. "The private track is ready. You promised you'd let me teach you to actually drive that Mustang." Lucian saved his work and stood, appreciating the sight of his wife in her natural element. "I'm still not convinced I can match your skill level." "You can't, but you can get better than the careful, controlled driving you've been doing." Valeria's smile was pure mischief. "Come on, let me show you what that car can really do." The private racetrack had been Lucian's wedding gift to Valeria, built on estate grounds with professional-grade surface and safety features. It was where she tested new vehicles, trained promising drivers, and occasionally just drove for the pure joy of speed and precision. Lucian slid into the Mustang's driver's seat while Valeria settled into the passenger side, her presence both comforting and intimidating. He'd watched her drive this car with supernatural skill. Now he had to demonstrate his own capabilities without embarrassing himself. "Start with the basics," Valeria said, her voice shifting into instructor mode. "Feel the car's weight distribution. Understand how it wants to move before you force it to do anything." He followed her guidance, taking the first lap slowly, getting comfortable with the track layout and the Mustang's responses. Valeria offered corrections and encouragement in equal measure, her teaching patient but demanding. "Faster through that corner," she said. "You're braking too early, giving up momentum you don't need to sacrifice. Trust the tires, trust the physics." Lucian pushed harder on the second lap, feeling the car respond with eager power. The Mustang was a revelation when driven properly, raw and violent, but also surprisingly precise, the classic engineering proving its worth against modern expectations. "Better," Valeria said. "Now try carrying your speed deeper into the turn before transitioning to power. Use the drift to pivot the car instead of scrubbing speed through the apex." The technique she described was counterintuitive, requiring him to maintain speed when every instinct screamed to slow down. But Lucian trusted her expertise, committed to the approach, and felt the Mustang slide through the corner with controlled fury. "Yes!" Valeria's excitement was infectious. "Exactly like that. You're starting to understand what this car can do." They spent 2 hours on the track, Lucian's skill improving incrementally with each lap, while Valeria provided guidance that was simultaneously demanding and encouraging. By the time they finished, he was exhausted and exhilarated, understanding why Valeria loved racing with such consuming passion. "You're getting better," she said as they stood beside the Mustang, both of them flushed and breathless. "Another few months of practice and you might actually be competent." High praise from Nix herself. "Don't let it go to your head. Competent is still miles away from good, and good is nowhere near excellent." But her smile suggested pride beneath the teasing criticism. Lucian pulled her close, kissing her with the kind of passion that 6 months of genuine partnership had built between them. "Thank you for teaching me this, for being patient with my learning curve, for showing me the world through your eyes. Thank you for finally seeing me instead of the statue I was pretending to be." They stood together beside the car that had catalyzed their transformation, watching the sun set over the private track, and Valeria felt the kind of peace that came from being exactly where she was supposed to be. 3 years later, Lucian DeLuca's empire ran with unprecedented efficiency, his territories secure, his alliances strong, and his reputation enhanced by his partnership with the legendary Nix. The underground racing circuit had evolved into a legitimate motorsports operation that attracted international sponsorship while maintaining its dangerous edge. Valeria stood in the operations center she'd designed, monitoring security feeds and logistics networks with the same focused intensity she brought to racing. She was head of logistics now, controlling the empire's supply chains, transportation networks, and security protocols. Her technical expertise combined with her strategic instincts made her invaluable, and Lucian's enemies had learned to fear her almost as much as they feared him. The private racetrack hummed with activity most evenings, Valeria testing new vehicles or training promising drivers. The Mustang still held pride of place in the garage, but it was no longer a museum piece. It was driven regularly, pushed hard, used exactly as it was meant to be used. Lucian appeared in his operations center, his presence still commanding but now carrying the ease of someone who trusted his partner completely. Ready to go home? In a minute. I'm tracking a shipment that's running behind schedule. Valeria's fingers flew across keyboards, rerouting resources and adjusting timelines with practiced efficiency. There. That should get it back on track. You're terrifying when you work, Lucian observed with obvious appreciation. Absolutely terrifying and completely magnificent. Good. That's exactly the impression I'm aiming for. Valeria saved her work and stood, stretching muscles that had been still for too long. Did you finish the negotiation with Chen? He's agreed to expand the circuit into 2 additional cities, wants you to design both tracks and recruit the head drivers. Lucian pulled her close, his arms warm and familiar around her waist. Apparently your reputation has spread far enough that people are willing to invest significant money just to be associated with anything Nix touches. Our reputation, Valeria corrected. I couldn't do any of this without your resources and support. We couldn't do it without each other. Lucian's kiss was soft and familiar, carrying 3 years of partnership and growing love. Come home. The Mustang is waiting, and I want to see if I can finally beat your lap time. You'll never beat my lap time. Probably not, but watching you drive is almost as satisfying as driving myself. They walked to the garage together, equal partners in an empire built on strategy, violence, and mutual respect. The Mustang waited for them, candy apple red paint gleaming under soft lights, every curve and angle perfect. Valeria slid into the driver's seat while Lucian took the passenger side, their positions reversed from 3 years ago when she'd stolen this car and reclaimed her life. The engine roared to life with familiar thunder, and she guided the vehicle toward the private track with easy confidence. I love you, Lucian said as they accelerated into the first turn, the Mustang drifting through the corner with controlled precision. Even though you're impossible and dangerous and completely unwilling to let me win at anything. I love you too, Valeria said, her smile fierce and genuine. Even though you called me a statue and took 6 months to realize what you'd married. I'll never make that mistake again. You better not, because I'm not going anywhere and I'm definitely not going back to being invisible. The Mustang screamed around the track, driven by the woman who'd once been called Hollow, guided by hands that understood power and precision in equal measure. And Lucian DeLuca, who'd thought he wanted a decorative wife, watched his partner race and understood that he'd gotten something infinitely more valuable. A queen who could save his empire. A driver who made physics look like suggestions. A woman who refused to be anything less than exactly who she was. And he had never been bored again.